recording. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Hopefully everyone can hear me well. Hello and good morning to everyone. This is super weird. Last year I did this in person. This year we're doing it virtually. I feel like I'm actually more nervous for the virtual part than seeing all of you in front of me because I'm just looking at a camera, and I will be for 3.5 hours. So just some housekeeping. The session is being recorded, which probably is a bad thing for me. Chat is available, so feel free to ask questions. I do have a couple of colleagues here which will curate things for me so I can answer if anything's urgent. You are welcome to unmute yourselves if you have any questions, although I really would recommend just putting it in chat and I will respond to it. If it's something sort of very specific and granular, we can take it separately and do that entirely. So with that, I'll take it away. My name is Vadim. Thank you all for coming to this first virtual conference of mine, pleased. I work for Calamuna. I'm an analyst. The session we're going to be doing today is all about data, owning your data. And it's going to be a mix of things. So the first part of this presentation is going to be this presentation itself. So a physical slide deck, I'll walk you through it. It'll give you guys a good idea of concepts, some things you need to understand before we get into the hands-on. And the second part of this presentation will be hands-on. I will be jumping into Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Data Studio. I'll be debugging things in real time. I'll get you guys to install some extensions. I will be using Chrome. So if you're using Safari or Firefox, switch to Chrome just for the sake of this presentation. It'll be a lot easier for you guys. This is very much unscripted, so things will go wrong, I am sure. And let's jump into it. A little clicker thing. So this is the agenda. All the things I have already said. This is who I am. So I have about 12 years experience. I've been on the client side. I used to work for American Express, a couple of payment processors. I then switched to the dark side of the agency world. I used to work at Publicis, which is a large agency sort of globally, I think #3. Now I'm working at Calamuna. My background is actually marketing, funny enough. I don't have a statistical or technical background. I got into analytics by chance. I was doing a bunch of work. I wasn't getting the answers I was looking for fast enough, so I just started getting into it myself. And somehow that became a full-time career. I'm gonna give you guys a spiel of Calamuna because that's who I work for. People are at the heart of everything we do. We like to create stories. We think we're storytellers, and the way that we do that is through implementations of these really complex solutions. Because we like the challenges that you may face, and we'd like to solve those challenges for you. We work with some fantastic organizations. And it's actually, I love working for Calamuna because you actually do make a difference, right? So I was there physically last year and we all chatted, for those of you who saw me last year. And it was nice just to chat with some of you because the organizations that we represent, a lot of them are nonprofits, they're in education. We work with a lot of colleges and universities. So it's nice to make a difference for once. We are a distributed team. We were distributed even before COVID. We're even more distributed nowadays. We are based in Oakland and Toronto. So I am actually in Toronto right now. And we're kind of all over the States. We have some support in Romania as well. So we're everywhere. And like I'm doing now, we're going to be sharing our knowledge freely and actively, right? Because we want to make sure that as a community, everybody grows together. So if I have certain knowledge that can benefit others, I'd like to share that. This is just a picture of us doing exactly that. I wish we could take a picture now, but it would just be me. It would be me in my office, which is not very exciting. We build the community as event organizers. So a long time ago, when Drupal 6 got discontinued, Calamuna organized a whole parade for it, and that was really fun. We foster community by sort of the interactions that are founded in meaning and service, right? So when these conferences were physical, we would have a booth, and we would always have some sort of like a fun activity or fun event. And all the funds from that, we would either match it or donate. So it's always for a good cause. So with that, we're gonna get into what we're all here today, Google Analytics. So again, the session is being recorded, so you will be able to see this after the fact. You can share this with your colleagues. Chat is available, and hopefully it's working for everybody. You will be able to unmute yourself if you have any questions that are so burning and urgent. But again, if you can stick to chat, that'd be super cool. So if you see me turning to the right, I'm not ignoring you guys. I'm just looking at my second screen. So I was thinking earlier of how to run this workshop, because you're physically not in front of me. What is the order of things that we're going to do? So I sort of created this little chart, and this is the way that it makes sense to me, because a lot of times folks, they hear all these buzzwords, right? They're like Google Tag Manager and tags and Data Studio Analytics, and it doesn't make sense, right? So many words, you don't necessarily know what any of them mean. So I did this little chart to help you understand how all of it connects together, just the pieces that I'll talk about today, because there's definitely more that is not on here. So all paid advertising is not on the slide. So we start with Google Tag Manager, which is number one, which in my mind is build. So I'm calling it build because this is where you create everything. This is where all your rules and logic and your triggers, that's where everything exists, right? This is the way things should be these days. It's no longer, hey, let me slap a Google Analytics code on a page somewhere in the header, call it a day. So that used to be fine because that was sort of the easiest thing you could do. But now we have Google Tag Manager, and we've had it for at least 5 or 6 years now. And you can do so much more. And it's fairly easy to get into GTM, at least the basics of it. So there's really not a reason not to use GTM these days. And the benefit is, if you're using GTM, you don't need to bother developers. And they are a busy bunch. They have lots of things on their plate. So if you use GTM, you can offload that work from them to you. So we have GTM where you build everything. You have Google Analytics where you collect all of your data and analyze it. And then you have Data Studio, which is sort of the end piece where you visualize all of your data. And I said visualize, not report, because you're not really going to be doing any reporting from Data Studio. In my mind, Data Studio is a health check. So you build all these charts and dashes, and they can show you that something is happening, but you're not going to know why, usually. So that's where you jump into GA, and that's where you dig, you do your little ad hoc analysis to figure out why is something happening. So that's the ecosystem we're going to cover today. Thank you, Michaela. So to set the stage, I'm going to go through some basics. And I know you guys probably know this, but hopefully there's like one tidbit that you can still take away from this, which would be super beneficial. So we use these metrics, and not a lot of times we actually understand what they're showing us, right? So you'll see when you log into GA, user sessions page views, they're all over the place. They're on all the different reports that GA has. And GA has over 150 reports, 150 different ways you could look at their data. So we need to understand what we're looking at, why these metrics matter. So we're going to use an analogy that I did not come up with, somebody far smarter did. So the way that I look at it is you have a user, an individual, a unique entity, and time range is really important here. So let's use the month of September. So in September, me, one person, well, it's a bad analogy. Let's pretend COVID doesn't exist and we can all go to the mall whenever we want. So let's say I need to buy new shoes, and instead of Amazon, I go to a physical store. So when I go to that physical store, that's a trip, that's a session, right? So I am one person. I went to the store, I bought a pair of shoes, came home, tried them on, they didn't fit me properly. Or my wife said they're terrible. And why did you buy this color again? Who knows? Never happens. So now I have to go back to the store and exchange that and buy another pair of shoes. So now I've gone to the store twice in September. So that is one user, 2 sessions. And let's say within one of my trips, I went to multiple stores. So I went to do my, I went to exchange my shoes, but I also want to get a bagel. I'm Canadian, so I can use that. So I want to get a bagel, and then I want to get something else. So each time I go to a different store, that's a page view, right? I look at a different piece of content within the same store. So in this analogy, we have the user, which is me, and a real human in brackets, because the reality is I've read research which states that up to 50% of all traffic is actually bots. And that's terrifying. And even though there is a button in GA to say exclude bots, that doesn't cover everything. It's definitely better than not clicking that at all, but it's not perfect. So hopefully my terrible analogy made a little bit of sense in terms of me as one individual user. And the way it translates to computers is a browser, right? So if you use your, let's say, Firefox, go to calamuna.com, then you use your Chrome, go to calamuna.com, and then you're on your mobile phone and you go to calamuna.com. Those are all three different users generating different sessions and pages, right? There's no way to stitch that. So even if in your minds you think you're using, let's say, one computer, a user is actually identified by the browser. And if you clear your cookies every so often, you're a different user in the eyes of Google Analytics. So this thing is not really science, right? The way I look at all of this in my profession is it's a blend of art and science. A little bit of, tidbits. One thing that's really important is that time-based metrics in Google Analytics are, a lot of people like to use them, and a lot of folks like to say time on page or average session duration, and they use that as a goal or as a KPI. That is a terrible KPI. I'll tell you why. The only way that Google Analytics has a way of determining how long you spend on pages is if you have a timestamp on page 1 and a timestamp on page 2. It does the difference between the two pages, and that's how it gives you your time. So if you have a site that has a lot as a news or blog, someone will go there. They most likely will bounce, right? So they go to your site, they read the specific content they were looking for, and then they leave because they got what they were looking for. So your bounce rate may be 90%, meaning that 90% of people only went to one page. That's all the bounce rate means. It means they went to one page, they did not go to another page. There's nothing time related when you're looking at the bounce metric. So when you're looking at time-based metrics, it's only looking at the 10% of people that did not bounce. So again, you have a blog, lots of people went there, 90% had a bounce rate. Sorry, you had a 90% bounce rate on a landing page, meaning 90% of people came and left. So your time-based metrics are based on the 10% that did not bounce, that went to another page, and that's how Google is able to figure out the difference between the two. And I know it's like a little tidbit. I'm not going to regurgitate what's on the slides because I'm guessing you've already read them as I've been talking. And there'll be a recording of this as well. What I would love to get through is sort of get through the deck and then jump into the tools. So, as you sort of improve your analytics maturity, you go from hard-coded GA script on a page to GTM, and then you start measuring yourselves not based on sessions, but on other things, right? Because all a session means is someone came to your site. It doesn't mean, it doesn't show you user intent. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to figure out? You're not going to get that from sessions. So what you need to do is, and this is an example, hopefully you can all see the screen. One of our clients, the Fine Arts Museum in San Francisco, I had the privilege of visiting it last year when everything was open. It's beautiful. So as you can see here, on the right-hand side, you have this debugger in black, and it's two columns. So the one column is what is available in the data layer. I'll explain that later. On the right-hand side, in this debugger, and we'll use this in about 40 minutes, sort of in the real demo, you'll see events that are firing, right? So as we're scrolling down, you see different events firing. So 10, 25, 50, 75, 90%. I clicked on a phone number, an event fires saying telephone link clicked, action is where did it happen, label is the phone number itself. You click on sign up on a newsletter, another event fired. So This is the missing link between just tracking, I have this many sessions to this page and this many sessions on that on the site or whatever. That is the basics. And as you improve your analytics maturity, you start to get into event tracking, and you track very granular things that matter to your business, right? So if you're a nonprofit, you're gonna be tracking the donate now button, right? That's gonna be super important to you. And you may have a platform that people are actually donating in, and that's all fine and dandy. You will get those results in terms of the volume of people that donated. But the reason you wanna have event tracking is, yes, they add a level of granularity, but you can also use them in other tools. So if you have a donate now button, you can then make that as an event, take that event, set it up as a goal in Google Analytics, and then connect Google Ads to Google Analytics. So there's a native integration between the two. You don't need to do anything fancy for it. And then in Google Ads, you can now retarget people based on the things that they've done through Google Analytics, right? So all of this is connected. So, if you're a university and you're trying to figure out, are people enrolling, are people watching our videos, are people doing any of these things, you want to use events to tag all those things. So you want to be able to see, are people watching our videos? How far in the videos are they getting? So there's a lot of additional functionality you can do by adding events to your site. And through Google Tag Manager, I'll show you, it is relatively straightforward. There are mistakes you can make, just like with anything, but there is a big support group that's there to help you. And yeah, I already talked about this. Goals. So it sort of may feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but it's all connected, right? So from events to goals. So this is just an example of the kind of goals that you can create. There are, I think, 3 or 4 different types of goals that you're able to make. So you can make a destination goal based on a page. So for example, if someone went to a thank you page, that's a destination goal. There's an event-based goals, which is, I would say, 95% of all the goals I have ever created. There is a duration goal, which I never use because I don't think it's useful at all. And there is, I think, a pages per session goal. Again, just seeing, did people hit 3 pages per session or not? So I've never used those ones. So duration and the other one I just said, I never use them. I use strictly event-based goals. That's majority of what I do. And then some destination goals. And destination is usually for e-commerce. So if you have a store, you have a checkout, there's a defined page for that, I'll create that as a goal. And I already explained why you want to have goals, sort of the added benefit of, well, all this data can go into Google Ads. But also, if you're doing any sort of paid advertising, even if you're not, when you're thinking of how you're going to evaluate your site, how you're going to evaluate your success at the end of the year, did I hit my numbers, whatever those may be, your bounce rate does not matter. Your page views do not matter. Your sessions do not matter. All of the sort of default stuff that GA gives you, they do not matter. They are good indicators, but they are not KPIs. Okay, so for any site, you need to sort of look at your site and see what are the things that are supporting our business objectives, right? So if you're a charity, or we can use a charity example, you want people to click the donate now button. You want people to fill out a form. You want people to call you, maybe download a PDF. All of those are your KPIs. You create them, you set them up in Google Tag Manager to fire events. You then set them up as goals in Google Analytics. And that is how you're going to evaluate yourself at the end of the year or whenever you do your reporting. And it's definitely not bounce rate. I know everyone loves bounce rate. I hate it. For some reason, it's become the only metric that sort of everyone knows, but it's actually a very poor metric to judge yourself, because sometimes it's not a problem that someone bounced, right? So if you've built a beautiful landing page and on that landing page, you have a form, someone's completed the form or downloaded something, you can have 100% bounce and you're still going to be tremendously successful. So I urge all of you, do not use bounce rate as a metric. It's something you should look at, but it's not a KPI, nor is sessions or page views or users, any of those things. They're sort of, you need to look at them because you want to see how traffic is fluctuating, but not a goal by itself. And again, just a reminder, there is a chat. So if you have any questions for me about the stuff that I'm covering, feel free to write something. I'm sort of casually glancing to the side, so feel free to do that. And I'm guessing a lot of you folks, you're working on Drupal, you may want to implement Google Analytics. This is what you would be doing, right? And you're not going to be wrong to do this, but also this is not the best way to do this. So yes, there is a little module that you can add to Drupal and you'll have Google Analytics. But all this is going to do is just start tracking page views, which is just not enough. So Girish, good question. So the question is, don't you think bounce rate becomes an important parameter as it makes us think why customers are not staying at the page? So if you look at the bounce rate, it's not going to tell you why, right? All it's going to show you is it's an indication of a potential problem. By implementing analytics, so whether it's scroll tracking, whether you're tracking different events, whether you add Hotjar, so you add a heat mapping tool, that will help you diagnose why people are not staying. Just the fact that you have a high bounce rate, I've seen a bounce rate of 95% and the client was successful. I've seen a bounce rate of 2% and everything was terrible. That was an indicator of technical problems. So, look at all the metrics with the lens of bounce rate plus something else, sessions plus something else. So bounce rate plus conversion rate. So you may have a terrible bounce rate, but a great conversion rate, right? One does not mean the other. So the first result is not always the best. What you want to be using is Google Tag Manager. So Google Tag Manager is exactly as it sounds. It is a tag manager. It is where you dump all of your third-party scripts in. So you're not going to go into Drupal and add things to the head of your theme. That is not a good way to do things anymore. So that used to be the way, 10 years ago, that's how you would do it, not anymore. So now everything goes through Google Tag Manager. And this is especially important for CCPA and for GDPR. Although I realize you folks probably don't care about GDPR. We have clients that do. But CCPA is also important. And in GTM is how you're going to control the fact that someone opted out. They don't want you to track them. So now you have to turn off all of your marketing pixels and your analytics and whatever they opted out of. And the easiest way to do that is through Google Tag Manager. So in Google Tag Manager is where you put in Google Analytics and AdWords and Facebook, chatbot, any third-party script. So you can add custom HTML, custom JavaScript, whatever you want. It can all go into Tag Manager. The beautiful thing about it is you don't need to wait for a code push, right? So your developers may have a release schedule. They should. So maybe every week, every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter, whatever that is. And you may need to do something urgently. And you may not have time, or you may not be able to fit into that release schedule. So if you have GTM, you don't need to wait for anybody. You can do all the changes you want yourselves. It loads asynchronously, meaning you don't have to wait for Google Analytics, Google AdWords, Facebook, Crazy Egg, all of them to fire, which will impact your load times. It's all asynchronous. Tag triggers and variables, I'll show all of that to you. You create all of so the events I was talking about, that little video that I showed of San Francisco Museum, where as you're scrolling down, scroll is firing. I click on a phone number, that fires an event. All of that is created in Google Tag Manager. And you can also, so if you have an e-commerce site, you don't really have a choice these days. You have to go through Google Tag Manager, because if you're going to try to do it manually, you're not going to have a good day. Let's call it that. Let's see, CCPA. Yeah, so CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act. Basically, it is, you need to give the people the ability to opt out of tracking. Now, I'm not a lawyer. There's a ton of other processes which you have to create on your side to be compliant with CCPA. So I will talk strictly about sort of my world of tags and analytics. there's a whole other body of work that you need to do in terms of making sure that if someone wants to delete their data, you have a process to do that. I'm not going to talk about that. And the difference between CCPA, which is California, but really applies to the entirety of the states, and GDPR is CCPA is everything works until you opt out. GDPR is the other way around. It's the inverse. So GDPR is nothing works until you opt in. So I'm simplifying it, right? I'm grossly simplifying it, but that's it in a nutshell. So for marketers in Europe, since GDPR has gone in place, they have had a lot of challenges. And I'll talk about CCPA towards the very end of this presentation. So just like you saw in the other little GIF that I had, or GIF, where you type in Google Analytics for Drupal and you have a little module, we have the same thing for GTM, right? So you can implement GTM through Drupal, and then you can choose a million different things which you may want to implement. So when I was saying custom HTML, custom JavaScript, there's a million platforms that you can implement through Google Tag Manager. So whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, it's much simpler to do through GTM than try to hard code it. And also, a lot of platforms, marketing platforms, will want you to do conversion pixels at a certain time, at a certain place, right? So if someone clicks here, then fire it. And then if you're a developer, again, it's just more work for you guys. So if you want to unload your development team, make your lives easier, GTM, it's the only way to go. And again, there are competitors to GTM. So Adobe has launched, there's Telium as well, but those are very expensive. And you're only going to use them if you have sort of the rest of the suite. So if you're going to be using Adobe Launch, you have the rest of the Adobe package. And if you're using Drupal, you're probably not really thinking about Adobe. So, and again, this is a sort of an overview. I'm going to jump into these tools very shortly, and we'll actually create things on the fly. It is a bit more time consuming to do that with a webinar, but I think it's beneficial because I've seen a lot of these webinars where people just walk through slides, and at the end of the day, you still don't know what you need to do. For me, I'm a visual learner. I actually want to see what is the button you click and why did you click on that? So we'll do that very shortly. So GTM, it's made up of 3 areas. We have your tags, which is the what is going to happen, what is going to fire. We have the triggers, which is why is this going to fire or when is this going to fire. And we have the variables, and the variables is, I call it, we're going to add some more data to whatever you're sending. So a variable could be, how many pages that you already visit, or it could be using a custom dimension which says this is a logged in user versus a non-logged in user. So variables are really handy. And again, I'll walk you guys through that when we're actually doing it. It'll be much easier to explain. So here, this is sort of the overview tab, the tags tab of GTM. So here you can see all the tags that I have. And you can see this nice naming convention that I have. So this one is GA for viewed page. This is GAE for Google Analytics event. So as you start building more and more things in Google Tag Manager, these containers become very large. And a lot of what Calamuna does is actually take over containers from media agencies and do audits of them and fix them. Because what will happen is you'll jump from agency to agency, and your GTM container will be a mess. You'll have tags in there, you'll have no idea what they're doing. The naming conventions of them aren't going to help because, again, they're poorly worded, so you're not going to know what they're saying. So this is some of the work that Calamuna does, and I'm sorry for the shameless self-promotion, but might as well. So you can see these are all the tags that I have. It shows you the type, so these are all Google Analytics, and then the firing triggers. So again, these are the rules of when is this going to fire. These are all nicely organized into folders, and folders, it seems like a silly thing, like why should I put stuff in folders? But it will save you when you have, you're onboarding a media agency, and then they have to create their own set of tags for, ads and pixels and Snapchat and Pinterest, all of those platforms. It's much nicer for them to have their own folder, not to interfere with whatever we're doing. here's a little demo of how easy it is to implement a Facebook pixel. And this is actually outdated now. As of a few months ago, there's actually an even better way to implement Facebook pixels. There's now community templates within the Google Tag Manager. So people can actually, you can import containers from other people. And there is one for Facebook, and it's super easy now. So you don't even have to do this. So this is just copy and pasting the custom HTML that comes out of Facebook. And then the trigger is all pages, right? So fire it everywhere. So that's all you have to do for that, right? So you didn't have to bother a developer saying, hey, Mr. Developer, can you please insert the snippet into all the pages that we have? Don't need to do that. You go into GTM, it takes you not even 60 seconds now. It'll be even faster with the template I'll show you in a second. Let me see. Can you zoom in so the text is more legible? I'll actually show this to you in real time. So Henry, we'll see the real stuff. This is just sort of the slides. I'll zoom in once I have a chance to actually jump into the platform itself. There's also there is a learning curve to using GTM. It may feel overwhelming, right? It certainly felt very overwhelming to me when I first started, but as you start using it, it becomes easier. But with like everything, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? There are templates and there are tools to make GTM setup faster. So I'll do this little video, but basically what this tool does, it's called GTM bot, and you give it access to your GTM container. You set all the things you want to include, and it will automatically push it to your GTM container. So let's give this a shot.
In this short video, I'm going to show you exactly what GTM bot can do. It's designed for digital marketers who frequently have to set up Google Tag Manager containers for their clients and want to do it in the fastest possible way. So let's get started. First of all, we select what we want to track. Now, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to say what to record page views and various other things, such as when an outbound link is clicked and a form is submitted. Try to include as many of the standard things which people like to track as possible, as well as AdWords. I'm going to track AdWords.
I realize the volume may not be the best, but the point is more so you have a this clickable interface where you can walk through and literally say, what are the things you want to set up in your Google Tag Manager account?
Next up, we enter some options that are specific to our site. So if my thank you page for my email marketing sign up is that, then I will just change.
So I'm not going to take you through sort of the whole presentation that it did. It's called GTM bot. If you Google that, I'm sure you'll find it. And when I found this, I was amazed because this saves you so much time. So before, I would have to go into every client and create everything from scratch. So here's the page you tag, here's outbound link clicks, inbound link clicks, phone down, whatever, all of these things. And now you have this tool which, with a couple of clicks of the button, it will push everything to your GTM container, and at least you have something to get started with. Now, I want to be very clear. Do not publish whatever it gives you. There's lots of things in that tool that I disagree with, I don't like. So even that sort of, the way that it does it, I still tweak everything. And I typically don't even use it anymore. But when I started, it really helps because now you have something real that you can play around with in your site versus trying to go through, Google and trying to search for how do I do this and how do I do that. This will give you a nice foundation of doing things. And it doesn't stop there. Let me get my thing here. Yes, I think that is it, Luke. Now, there's also recipes. So there's really two sources for recipes nowadays. There's Analytics Mania. So there's a bit.ly there for, and I'll click on it in a second. I'll show you guys. There's recipes and then Bounteous, which used to be called Lunametrics before the acquisition, but now it's Bounteous. And then you have, so I created these little bit.ly links just so you guys can get to them faster. But basically what this does is it gives you a file. So you click download, it gives you a file, and you can import that file into your GTM, and it will again create all of these things for you. So you can see, where's my little laser pointer thing? Laser pointer? There you are. So you can see, for example, enhanced e-commerce variable pack for Shopify. I've actually used this, and it's fantastically useful because Shopify by itself does not really provide you anything. There are, where is it? Let me see. So this sort of was a good one before GTM did it natively, but scroll tracking. So you could import this into GTM, and it will do all the sort of the work for you for scroll tracking. You can do the same thing for LinkedIn and the outbound link clicks. So let me jump over and go to one of these. So Julius, he's big in the analytics community. He didn't create a lot of these. He's just sort of putting them all together in one place. So search for Google Tag Manager recipes. And then there's a big list here, right? So lots and lots of different things. Let's see. So file downloads. So let's get this recipe. I'm not going to do it right now, but it'll give you a good idea. We'll do this in like 20 minutes. So you literally download this container. It has everything you need. So this is JSON file. You import it, and then it's all going to be there in GTM waiting for you to publish. It's fantastic. So that's recipes. So you really have, I guess, 3 different ways of how you can get started with GTM. You can do it the painful way, where everything is blank and you just have to figure out for yourselves. You can go through GTM bot, where you can sort of pick and choose what you want, and then it will dump everything into your container. Or you can go through these recipes, and there's a whole bunch of them, and you can import them into your GTM as well. So there's a couple of different ways of getting started with these things. Now, I want to be clear, you also want to do a lot of testing, right? So these are all very generic. They are not tailored to your exact site. So some of them may not work on your site. Some of them may need some certain changes to work in your site. Quite often, I change the way the events fire themselves because I don't agree with the naming conventions, right? So you may want to change that. So this makes your life easier, but it is not the silver bullet. Cool. Data validation. So that's a very fancy way of saying, is anything broken? And you may have been led to believe that Google Assistant, so Tag Assistant, that's what you should use because it's made by Google. Well, it's not. I really don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is it gives you a lot of false positives, meaning that you may see that it will tell you something is broken, but it actually is not broken. So I'm not saying don't use it ever. There is really useful recording functionality inside of Tag Assistant, which is good, which I use. But for basic QA, I don't use this tool. I actually use a tool called Data Slayer. And only tech people can get away with words like that. So this is a really, really useful debugging tool. It works across a number of different platforms. So whether it's Google Analytics, whether it's Adobe, it brings in GTM as well. So what you see here and hopefully this is zoomed in for you. I'm not sure how to zoom in anymore, at least in PowerPoint here. It does. So this is firing events. And the nice thing about Data Slayer is you can actually see. So you can see this is the Google Analytics ID where your data is going to. This is the type. So it should be universal, although I still see clients with classic. You don't really want that anymore. It's telling you how did the data get there. So it got there through Google Tag Manager. And then it's showing you that this was an event and the category, action, and label were as such, right? So this tool is very light. It shows you everything you need. And it's the one I use. The only little tidbit, and this is more of like me being annoying, I always uncheck this in the settings, use 3-column layout. I always use 2 columns. It makes life a lot easier because 3 columns just takes too much space. And it's also nice because you can actually ignore certain Google Analytics IDs. So, we work on sites where you may have 4 different Google Analytics IDs. You may have one from the site owners. You may have one from the media agency. You may have another one from a vendor, right? So maybe you have a platform, a donation platform or a video platform, and they like to stick in their own analytics snippets as well. And then when you're debugging, you see this giant list of all of these things working and firing, and you may not even know, Are they the ones you care about? So you can actually stick a bunch of them in here and ignore them to only see what you care about. Perfect. So, I'm gonna take a sip of water. The net in terms of why does all of this matter? It's because you want to use Google Tag Manager to make your lives easier, to make developers' lives easier. And even if you're a developer, you should also use Tag Manager because it will still make your life easier. It's much easier to set up events in there. It's much easier to fix things if they're broken. It's much easier to manage. It's more future-proof that way. So if you ever, for example, switch themes or switch content management systems or what have you, having GTM there is going to make your life a lot easier. When you're creating all of these events in Google Tag Manager, they will show up as events in GA, but then you can make them as goals. So then at the end of the day, we have this goal of purchases completed, and that's a pretty solid goal. And then you have your channels of how are people getting to my site. And yes, you have your users and your sessions, and that's all fine and good. But then you have your goals, and this is how you're going to evaluate your traffic, right? So you're not going to say organic search was the best because I had the most sessions from it, and the bounce rate was mid-pack. Who cares? You're going to evaluate it based on purchases. Did people buy stuff, right? Or did they donate? Did they click? Did they play a video? Any one of those. The highlighting, just an FYI, this is not native to GA. This is the little plugin I use. I forgot what it's called, but I will send it in the Zoom chat after this. I'll find it for you guys. It does a little. You can see that you can do a heat map. You can do a little bar, this little bar that pops up. Just visually easier to see sort of what you're looking for. So here you can see an example for paid search. This site, whatever it may be, doesn't have a ton of paid search. It only makes up 2.6% of all the traffic, but the conversion rate, 0.4%, far better than everybody else. So yes, the number of purchases wasn't the highest. Search still dominated, but the conversion rate was by far the best. So this could start a path of analysis to say, well, why is that happening? Who is the audience that we're targeting on paid search? How can we improve this? And if you were just looking at, so if you didn't have all this, if you don't have goals set up, you really wouldn't know that, right? You would just say, oh, okay, well, paid search is 2%. Who cares, right? It doesn't really make up anything. It's, balance rate is all right, 33%. People look at 5 pages per session. Session duration is whatever. What I'm saying is, and Girish, to your question of why should we not look at bounce rate, is because in this scenario, the bounce rate is not really going to help. It's bounce rate plus something else. So looking at sessions and bounce and your goal, that will help you start understanding where's the opportunity, where's the problem. I'm not going to do this recap. I'll talk about CCPA. So I don't want this to be a scary slide, but it is. So, and the reason it is because the fines for CCPA and GDPR are severe, right? And whether you're a university, whether you're a nonprofit, it doesn't really matter. You still need to be compliant, right? So there's rules in terms of, I think it's something like, if you make over $25,000 a year, you could be sued by, you could be impacted by CCPA. Again, I'm not a lawyer, nor is Calamuna, but read up on CCPA. I guarantee you it's far cheaper to be compliant with CCPA than risk the potential, not just the fines, but also the publicity in the news. I don't think I've seen anything yet where, the state of California is prosecuting anyone. They have bigger problems right now. But just keep that in mind. Don't ignore it, because it is, it will be cheaper to follow CCPA than not to follow it. And I've kind of alluded to this in the very beginning of the presentation, just trying to explain the differences between the two. One other important distinction with CCPA is there are different types of cookies as well, right? So it's not blanket. It's not turn everything on or turn everything off. You do have, your performance cookies, and your, I'm calling it targeting slash media cookies. And every tool is going to be different, right? So whether you're using OneTrust or TrustArc or the million of other tools that help you with this compliance, roughly they're all going to bucket them the same. You have the analytics and you have all of the advertising. So with CCPA, like I mentioned before, everything can work. So by default, you're fine, you're good, everything can work. But if someone chooses to opt out, you have to stop tracking them. So if they opt out of everything, everything stops. They opt out of media, media stops. GA can keep running. Where GDPR is quite a bit different, which I'm not going to cover because I think you guys are all in the States, or responsible for clients that are in the States. One caveat that I want to point out is Shopify. So if anyone is using Shopify, you will have extra challenges because the regular tier of Shopify does not allow you to make any changes to the checkout process or the transaction purchase thank you page, whatever you want to call it. And that's a problem because it's possible that someone has landed on your site, looked at products, looked at whatever, and then when they're checking out, for some reason, they have now turned off everything. So no more analytics, no more media. And the regular version of Shopify, you have no mechanism to actually turn off those things. So there are sort of ways to get around that. I'm not going to cover that now. If you're curious, send me a note. I'll be happy to chat. But just an FYI. So we also have some extra resources. So there's a demo store, which we'll be using literally right now. So if you don't have an analytics account of your own, I do suggest that you guys just type up Google Analytics demo account, and it's something you can actually add to your own account. And you can see how Google has set up it's like their demo store, but I actually think it's their real store. And it's outdated nowadays. It's not the best. But if you don't have anything that receives a ton of traffic, this is definitely good. Okay. There's also a document that I've created for Calamuna, which has all of these sort of little tidbits that I'm probably going to cover as I talk through the rest of the presentation. But if you want to have a nice thing that you want to print out and just read, this is it. Or save paper, don't print, just do it digitally. So that's it for the presentation piece. The rest of it is going to be, I'm going to switch over and I'm going to go into the tools and we're going to walk through tools. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Does anyone have any questions? Anything that I went through that didn't make sense? Feel free to use chat. I'll read through and answer your questions. I'm also going to take a 5-second bio break. I know, we're all live now and virtual, so I can't actually go anywhere. So bear with me. I'm going to take a short bio break. I'll be back in literally 2 minutes. Sorry, I probably should have left it on this slide. Yeah, it's GA Tips 15. If it doesn't work, let me know. I'll double check everything. But for the demo store, just type in Google Analytics demo account and import it into your Google Analytics account, and then you'll be able to play with it. I don't see any questions, so we will get started. And as I'm going to be doing sort of a hands-on demo, I will definitely be jumping around between the site, Google Analytics, and Google Tag Manager, because it's an ecosystem. One works with the other. And I'm going to be using our site as the test ground for everything. So this is our beautiful site. Let's question about slides. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how this will all be distributed. Yeah, and when the slides will be shared, no issues there. I assume we'll just add a link to Hopin in the in that platform. We'll add the link. So the first thing you want to know is you have a site. How do I even check if I have analytics on there? So the tool that I mentioned is going to be Data Slayer. So I'm going to type in Data Slayer into my Chrome. And here it is. It's a little plugin. Add extension. Beautiful. So now we have it. So now let's go back to Calamuna. I'm going to hit F12. Yes. Go away. I'm going to hit F12 on my keyboard. You may want to hit Control-Shift-I. I think that does the same thing. But you want to be here. You want to be in your console. And I'm going to bring in Data Slayer. So this is what Data Slayer looks like. So you have this one column, which is just everything that's happening on your site. This is the data layer. It doesn't mean it's actually going anywhere. It just means what is available to you. On the right-hand side is what is making its way into Google Analytics. So when you look at this, and after you install it, make sure to refresh it, right? So this is what's available to us. And what you see here is that nothing is available to us. And then you can't believe the number of panics I've had where something like this has happened. And you try to figure out, did I do something wrong? Did I break the site again? And then you realize, well, actually, let me bring this over here. I have ad blocking turned on. So whenever you do any analytics debugging, if you're using Chrome, if you have ad block, whatever plugin you've used, if you have a desktop application like I do for AdGuard, turn it all off. Turn it all off because you're not going to be able to see anything. So now you do have the information now that cookies are allowed to fire. So I'm going to go into this little cog and I'm going to take off 3 columns. And I'm going to go back in here. Now we have what we're looking for. So now I'm going to refresh. So now we have 3 different things that fired. So the first one is this one. I can zoom in, I think. Yes, I can. Beautiful. So we have 3 different things that fired. We have our Google Analytics itself through Google Tag Manager. This is the page that made its way into Google Analytics. This is a custom dimension, and this is the client ID. A client ID is when Google Analytics loads on your page, it drops a cookie. It tries to identify this browser uniquely. And the only way it can do that is by a client ID. So if you ever have cross-domain tracking problems, it is very often because the client ID does not pass from one domain to the other, and you have to set up cross-domain tracking. So the way to test that is by looking at the client ID and making sure it's the same one. When it's the same one across all of your domains, then you know you're fine. So the reason I want to surface this is because I often do analysis based on client ID. It's useful for me. You will then see 2 other things fire. So you see the events. So 2 events that I've set up for scroll tracking. So category scroll tracking, where is it happening on Calamuna? What is the percent? 25, 50%. So you can see, our homepage is relatively small. So 2 events fired at the same time for both 25 and 50%. And now we scroll down, 90% fired. Great. So now we're going to get into how do we start tracking stuff. Okay. So I'm going to click on this phone number. Let me try to zoom in here as well. So I'm going to click on this phone number down below. I'm going to hold the control key. And if you guys are on Mac, I'm sorry, I have no idea. Command key, no idea. So I'm going to hit Control and just click on it. And when you do that, basically, it doesn't open a new window. So it's useful for debugging. Holding Control and something else opens a window somewhere else, but you stay on the same page and you see what fires. So, you can see this category clicked on telephone link click, Calamuna, and what was the phone number itself. We have a question from Martina. Sure, good question, Martina. So the reason we have 2 events is our homepage, it's small, it's short. So what the scroll tracking event is doing, it's calculating the height of the entire page. It's splitting it up into percent, and at predefined percent, at predefined intervals defined by me, it fires an event. So as I scroll down the page, let me see if there's a bigger page that I can give you an example on. So let's do it here. So this is a much longer page because it's a blog. So I'm going to start scrolling and look on the right-hand side. So look over here. So I'm going to scroll. And obviously it doesn't work because I'm doing a demo. But you can see here, so percent, 25%. Oh, actually, we excluded it from the blog. But anyways, so here in the data layer, you can still see it firing. So 25% has fired. I keep scrolling. 50% has fired. I keep scrolling. 75% has fired. Keep scrolling. 90% has fired. So scroll tracking is basically, it gives me an indication of, if I have a long page like this, how much content are people consuming, right? So often you will have these really long, beautiful posts, and if you do the analysis, maybe no one's getting to even half of them because they're just so long. So that may be an indication to you you need to shorten your content down. So hopefully that explains why there are 2 events. I'm going to go back to the homepage. So I'm on the homepage. I have this phone number. I click on it. So someone wants to call us. Fantastic. That's a great goal, FYI, right? Fantastic goal. Someone wants to call us. Maybe it's new business. And then I'm able to see that. When I log into Google Analytics, I can see in events that someone clicked on a phone number on our homepage, and this is the phone number they clicked on, right? If I go to the About Us page, because it's in the footer, this phone number, and I click on it, now, so the event fires again, but now what changes is the fact that it's now on the About page, right? So this is dynamic, which is really nice. So with Google Tag Manager, you're able to do things dynamically. You create one tag and it covers the scenarios across your entire site. Versus in the old days where Google Analytics, for something like this, you had to include it on every single place where you had a phone number. And that would get really, really annoying, especially to your developers. But let's, for our sake, say we have this button. We like making new friends, and we do. We love making new friends from a 6-foot distance. But we want to know. So I click on this. It takes us to the contact form. Great. So a page view fires, contact form. So I know someone has been on this page. But what I want to know is, I want to know clicks. I want to know clicks on this button. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to Google Tag Manager, our Google Tag Manager for Calamuna, and we are together going to create this tag of how do I track this button? So remember at the very beginning, I was sort of saying, this is what I want to spend the bulk of our time doing. I want it to be a real demo because in my opinion, the slide presentations, they're good, but you know, I want to be able to see things. So I'm going to jump over to Google Tag Manager. If you're not familiar with Google Tag Manager, that's cool. Let me get you to the admin side. So Google Tag Manager has these 3 sort of defined areas. Let me see if I can zoom in here as well. So we have workspace, we have versions, we have admin. Workspace is one functionality I actually only recently started using, maybe in the last year. I overlooked it for the longest time, but it is so incredibly useful. So workspace basically gives you this isolated area to do your own thing. And this is not super useful when you're one, you know, you manage everything. But when you are a big organization and you have an agency that does social media, that does paid advertising, that does something else, you want to create these workspaces. So if someone needs to make a change, they are separated from everybody else. Meaning, if I make some changes, paid media agency does changes, we are in two workspaces. So when I publish my changes, so when I publish the changes and everything goes live, the media changes have stayed in the container in the workspace. They have not been published because maybe they're not ready yet, right? So I'm doing some changes. I hit publish. If we didn't have workspaces, everything would be published, including the media tags that were not complete. So by creating workspaces, you're protecting yourselves from any potential whoopsies that may arise from that. So I urge you, always create a workspace. It is super simple. You just go into workspace and say, Badcamp demo 2020. That's it. So now you'll notice there's two workspaces. There's the default workspace and there is the Badcamp demo, which is what we're going to be doing. Now, let me try to do this. Let's actually show you. I talked about recipes. Let me show you what that actually looks like. So let's find a phone number recipe. Here it is. Contact link click recipe by Bounteous. Okay, and I go into that, and just for us friends, we're gonna try to track this thing, right? So I'm gonna import it and show you what it imports. I'm not gonna publish anything because I already am tracking this, and I definitely don't want anything to double fire. So we have this little recipe. The instructions are basically save this JSON file. Done. Read the blog post if you want to know how to import things, but I'll show you guys how to do that. So now we're in here. Here is the sort of the basic interface of it. If you want to know what your GTM is, there it is. If you want to install Google Tag Manager, this will just give you the snippet of what to place and where. And this is import container. So this is where your recipes is how you're going to try to import them. So I'm going to choose the file, which I just downloaded. So here's my contact link clicks JSON. It's going to ask me, where am I putting this? So I'm going to put this into an existing workspace, the one I just created for Badcamp. And here is a critical moment. I really want everyone to pay attention. Do not overwrite. I've done this and I've wasted hours of my life. So never overwrite, always merge. If you overwrite, whatever you're importing will wipe out everything else and it will be the only thing left in your entire container. So do not ever overwrite, always merge. And then you can either, overwrite with conflicting tags or you can rename them. I always sort of go the safer way and just rename it. Then this shows you, what are you importing? So you have one tag, one trigger, and a couple of different variables. And then if you want to see what that is, so now it's going to show you it's importing a tag, an event. It's got this trigger basically saying if there's a telephone number or a mail to. So this is for emails. And it's also giving us some variables. Now this is, the way they're doing this is probably fancier than it needs to be done, but it's still nice. Why not? So now we confirm it. And now in our Badcamp demo, in our overview, we've now imported everything we just looked at a second ago. So now let's go to our tag. This is our Google Analytics event tag. So we can see what has been imported. And again, I imported this. I have made no changes to this whatsoever. So the category that will fire is contact link click. The action is, this is a lookup table. So basically what they've done is, instead of creating multiple tags for these fire on all phone numbers, these fire on all mail clicks, they've done a lookup table to say, I'm going to use one tag, and this lookup table will tell me whether it's a phone click or a mail click. And then this is the click URL, and this will bring in either the phone number or the actual email of what was clicked on. Now, I was saying earlier about you have to be careful when you import these things, right? Because not all of the settings inside of them are still accurate. A lot of these recipes are relatively old. Like I think this one is 2 or 3 years old now. So you're going to go in here. If you ever do this, you are never going to override anything. Do not override. you are always going to create a Google Analytics settings variable. So by doing this, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second, by doing this, you don't have to type anything in. You don't have to type in UA dash blah, 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 because sometimes, eventually, you will make a mistake. And I actually just had this with a client where instead of dash 11, they did dash 1. And it was still our account, but we were sending data to a different place, and we were missing data from where it was actually supposed to be. So by creating it once and having it dynamically everywhere else, you're reducing the chance of any problems happening. So again, we had this as enable overriding. We're not going to want to do this. And even this cookie domain thing, again, this is part of your Google Analytics settings variable, because this recipe that we've imported is a couple of years old, and back then this thing didn't exist. And then the trigger is, when is this going to happen, right? So the tag is what is going to fire, and we're going to collect all this great information. And then when is it going to happen? So it is a click on just links on any page where the protocol is mail to or tell, right? So anywhere you have a clickable phone number, let me show you. So when you go here and inspect your element, you can see, right? So a phone number, a clickable phone number is just a link. And you can see right here, it says TEL. I don't know if I can zoom in. Oh, that's terrible. But here you can see TEL. And on a mail, it'll just say mail to. So the logic that it's using is basically fire when you see a click on a link that has mail to or tell. So that's all this thing is doing, right? So if you weren't sure on how to do that, you can certainly import recipes and then, publish them, see what happens. I mean, preview them first. I'm not going to preview this. We're going to do slightly different, but just to give you an idea of what is possible. So I'm going to go back to this workspace. I'm going to delete this workspace because this is not what I wanted to do. I got sidetracked. So we're going to delete this. Now, when you're in Google Tag Manager, you have all these things, these built-in variables by default. Nothing super exciting there. And then you have these user-defined variables. And the most important one that you can create is your Google Analytics settings variable. So I still see a lot of clients creating these constant things. So let me show you the difference. So when you create a constant one, so you'll say something like, where are you? So this is the way that people did it, again, only a couple of years ago. These things change very fast. So you'll do something like this, right? And then this you would dynamically add to all of your other tags. But the problem is this doesn't include things like linking domains, setting your cookies, adding any custom dimensions. This doesn't include any of it. You would have to do it in every single event. Now, you do everything in one place. You create what is called a Google Analytics settings variable, and you put in your tracking ID, so this part does not change. So now you do your cookie domain, auto, and then you can change things like you can anonymize IP, you can force SSL, you can allow linker, you can add custom tasks, you can set speed sample, like you can do all sorts of things, and it will apply to everything, right? So you no longer have to manually change your one page view tag, which is easy, but all of your events, because all of your events will now reference this one Google Analytics settings variable. And again, I realize what I'm saying could be somewhat complicated, but this is an intermediate session. This is not a GTM for beginners. So my assumption is that you've used this interface, you have some understanding of how it works. And this is also the place where you can add custom dimension, custom metrics. You can do your cross-domain tracking, right? So for example, if you have, we can use Calamuna's example. If we have calamuna.com, and for some reason we've geo-detected that you're actually Canadian, you can, maybe we give you a little banner says, hey, you want to go to calamuna.ca? And then you say yes. And calamuna.com, calamuna.ca are two different domains. So you need to set up cross-domain tracking. And you could do that very easily in here. I've done it dynamically, but you can do it simpler. You can just literally type in, you type in calamuna.com, comma, Calamuna.ca. Done. That is your cross-domain tracking for everything in your entire account, right? So we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it the way it is. So this Google Analytics settings variable is critical. Do not use constant. It has to be this specific thing. And when you're importing things, so when you're importing recipes, whether you're importing from Analytics Mania, whether you're importing from somewhere else, always make sure that nothing is saying, override. Make sure you're always referencing your dynamic variable. Okay, so that was a nice little sidetrack. Back to, we have a button and we want to track that button. And actually, before I do that, any questions about what I just mentioned? Cool. So how do we track things, right? So let's pretend this is a donate now button. Let's pretend this is a video play. Let's pretend this is something really, really important to you. So how do you track it? There's a couple of different ways. You can, if you're, let's say, more on the tech savvy side, you can inspect this element. Where'd you go? Here. And you can see sort of how it's made up. So you can see that we have, it's a link, it's going to contact, it's also got the span class of preamble, but also it's got this text in it. We like making new friends, get in touch. So could use that. Another way of doing it is, let's unzoom this thing. Let's just get into preview mode. So preview mode is how you debug everything. This is how you make sure things are working. And you should never publish before you preview to make sure it's all working. So when I got started with GTM, I didn't really realize how preview mode worked. So I would literally publish everything to the live site, test it, say, oh crap, this isn't working, go back, make changes, publish again, and that would rinse and repeat. And that is a terrible way of doing it. You should always preview so you're not just publishing changes all over the place because you don't know the impact of those. So now we are in preview mode, and sometimes preview mode will not work. And it will not work for the same reasons as Google Analytics and GTM not working, because you have your ad blocking turned on. Usually that's the case. So make sure you have ad blocking turned off. We're on a Calamuna site. Let's close this guy. Let's refresh. And now we got this debugger down here at the bottom. I'm going to expand it so you guys can see. So what this is showing us is everything that has fired on this page so far. And you can actually click into the individual calls, whatever you want to call it, and see what fired and what didn't. So you can see when the container loaded, we have all of these tags that have fired. We have these tags that have not fired. And then you can click through. So when DOM is ready, when we have the windows loaded, some scroll depth, some clicks, right? So this is preview mode. So we want to understand what happens, and this is kind of hard to see because it's the very footer. So when I click on this, so notice right now we're at number 10, right? So click 10, this is the last one. I'm gonna hold control because I don't want to go to the new window and click. And now two things have happened, a click and a link click. And now if you want to figure out what is the easiest way for me to track this, you're gonna scroll up, just make this bigger, link click. And now you see in this debugger, there are 4 tabs. You have your tags, your variables, your data layer, and your errors. Most of the time, you're going to spend between tags and variables. So now you're looking at all the variables that have been captured by Google Tag Manager. This does not mean any of this data has been sent to Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager. It simply means when you made that click, Google Tag Manager was automatically able to pick up these variables. So in here in Google Tag Manager, let's go back to these. See how we have these built-in variables and you can turn them on. So you have page variables, utilities, errors, clicks. So always turn on all the clicks. See how these are all turned on? This is going to be most of what you're going to be using when you start your journey with GTM. You have your forms. History, this is specific for single page applications. So if you have a single page application, you're going to have some issues trying to do it sort of the regular all page views. It's not going to work for you because single page application doesn't have pages. So the Calamuna site is not built that way. You don't have to worry about it. So I turn all of this off. Videos, so you can, if you have embedded YouTube onto your site, you can natively track all of these things. You just turn them on. You'll see all of them firing in the data layer, and then you can use those variables and you can put them into your events, scrolling, and then visibility as well. So visibility is one of those things where you can actually fire an event when someone has, let's say, for example, and this happens a lot, unfortunately, you have a sign up form to email. It's in your footer. It's a little widget. You type in your email, you hit submit, nothing happens. URLs doesn't change. You don't get redirected anywhere. The only thing that happens is a little thank you message. Thank you for signing up. And you want to know how many people signed up on your site. So you would actually use this visibility thing to see that this message, that someone saw it. So for now, I'll jump over to here. So these are, again, click classes and click elements and click IDs. These are the same ones, the click classes, click element, click ID. So I have turned these on, and because I've turned them on, I can see them in my debug mode in the variables. So when I did a link click on that button, click element was contact. So this is the, where is this click going to? Click text, we like making new friends, get in touch. And then you can see, what else? You have form text, so that works as well. Some cross-domain tracking. So all the stuff that is not going to be super useful for us right now. But what was useful is click text, right? So we know we have this click text that we clicked on. So we're going to use that to create our very first tag to see what are people, how many people are clicking on that. So I'm going to copy that. We're going to go into Google Tag Manager. I'm going to create a new workspace, right? Always create new workspaces. We're going to create a new tag, new. So this is what it looks like when you're first starting to create tags. So what I urge you is have a really clean naming convention for yourselves. Don't just write random stuff that you think in the moment, because in 3 months, you're not going to remember what you wrote and what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to say, this is a Google Analytics event dash, what button is this? Let's go take a look. So this is the get in touch button, right? So get in touch, click, great. Folder, so where's this gonna go? This is gonna go into site tracking. So remember I was saying earlier, if you have a media agencies and they have a ton of their tags, have them create their own folder and put that all into that. So this is gonna be in site tracking. This is the tag. This is the most important piece. This is the, what do you want from me? Right? So you are gonna be you're gonna be sending data to Google Analytics. But notice how there's a ton of other things in here, right? So you can do Google Ads conversion tracking, you can do remarketing, you can do floodlights, you can do Google Optimize. There's a million other platforms in here. So if you want to do some A/B testing with Crazy Egg, if you want to do some heat mapping with Hotjar, lots and lots of other things. One of the things I was going to show you is in the slides, I showed you Facebook and how to import Facebook really quickly, like just copy and paste that snippet. You can actually do that even faster now. So this is tag templates. Type in Facebook, Facebook pixels by Simo Ahava. Add it to your workspace. Add it to your workspace, all good. Give it a second to bring in. This is all you have to do now. You don't even need to have custom HTML. You put in your custom ID, you put your pixel ID in here. You're gonna say it's a standard page view. And then you're gonna say trigger based on all pages. You're also gonna wanna comply with CCPA, right? Like I mentioned. So you're gonna say limit the data collection. And by default, 00 means Facebook is going to geolocate you and not fire its own thing for people in California. So if you wanna be compliant with CCPA, you could do it this way. Or you can do it through Google Tag Manager. However you want to do it, it really depends. So if you do, sorry, I'm going to backtrack. If you have not bought a cookie management platform, Facebook gives you the ability to still comply with CCPA. So, and if you also, so this is the first one you implement, this is just fires on all the page views. You can also then say, maybe you have conversion pixels with Facebook. You want to track someone added something to cart. Someone has opted into a newsletter, right? That's a lead. Someone has scheduled a demo with you. So all of these events, which you would have to do custom events and custom code for, are part of this template. So it's never been easier to, I feel like an infomercial now, it's never been easier to implement Facebook. It's using this template from Simo, it just makes life so much easier. So I'm gonna go back because this is not what I want to do. I want to do a simple event saying GAE, get in touch, and I want to send my data to Google Analytics. Folder is site tracking. Okay, so now we have the beginnings of a tag, and we have the option of creating a couple of different tags. We can do page view or event. There's also all of these other transactions, social, timing, blah, blah, blah. A transaction you're going to use for e-commerce. I honestly have not used these other ones. So in our case, this is going to be an event. So if someone clicks on that button, we want to fire an event. Category. So with event tracking, there's kind of a hierarchy, at least in my mind. So your category is going to be, in the broadest sense, what is the action someone is doing? So you saw on our site, let's get rid of this. Let's go back to the blog. Okay. So you saw on our site, for example, I'm going to scroll. It's going to fire an event. So there's a hierarchy to my madness, right? It's not just random. So the category is, in the broadest sense, what is the thing that's happening? So scroll tracking. Action is, what page is this happening on? And label is the specific of 90%, for example. So this is the way I always do it. This does not mean this is the right way to do things, right? So people will say, well, why are you capturing the page in there? Because you can always bring in page as a secondary dimension to all your analysis. And that is true, but I don't like doing it that way. I like to always have it available to me, because if I ever need to filter things, it's going to be so much simpler dealing with just events and not trying to bring in pages. So that is the method to the madness. So I'm going to say, I'm going to keep it generic for now, CTA click, right? Because that's what we're going to do. The action is, and for me, it's always, where is it happening on? Right, so I'm gonna do, actually, let me not use the brackets. Let me go into this. So these are variables. This little block, this is the variable, meaning how am I going to populate this thing? All right, so I want to capture what page is happening on. A page is made up of two different things. It's made up of your host name, which for us is calamuna.com, and the page path, which is, on the home page, it's just slash. On other pages, it'll be like /blog, /about. One thing that I see folks doing is using this guy, page URL. Do not use page URL. I'll explain why. Page URL will include the host name and the path, but also it will include query parameters. It will include all the garbage that all other platforms can add. So for example, if you've deployed something from MailChimp, someone's gone to your site, it will add MC_CID to the URL. If you've done a Facebook ad campaign, it will add FB_CLID to a URL. And that's great for those platforms because that's how they track, but it sucks for Google Analytics because what you've now done is you have duplicated, triplicated, quadrupled the number of page views that you see from the same actual URL. Meaning, if you're driving people from, let's say, Facebook to your homepage and you have different Facebook IDs, you will have multiple line items of the same page in your Google Analytics. And that is going to make analysis really hard. So always don't use page URLs. There's almost never a good reason to use page URLs. I always do page host name and page path. Let me just type that in. Okay. And then label is, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to populate it. So label is actually an optional field. You don't have to populate it. You have to populate a category in action. It's mandatory. But for label, I'll keep it simple. I'll just say click text. Okay. Value, this is specific for ecom, so you're not going to use this. Don't try to shove random things into value. Okay, don't try to put in click text or anything else. So value, unless it's a number, unless it's ecom, don't use value. Non-interaction. This one is a big one. This one is important. And it's too bad that Google has done a fairly poor job with how little they've communicated about this, because it can make or break your implementation. And I say that because I have broken implementations not doing this properly. And it's also using double negatives, which is even more confusing. So non-interaction hit can be either true or false. And what this means is if non-interaction hit equals false, it means this event, when it fires, has the potential to impact your bounce rate. If it is true, it will not impact your bounce rate. So a scenario of that is someone lands on your landing page, and you asked this question, very high bounce rate. So someone came to your landing page, you have a form that you want someone to download. So and you've created an event to track the form download. If this is set to false, this will affect bounce rate, meaning your bounce rate will be decreased because there has been some sort of interaction on your site. So if your entire site is landing pages, or if it's all blogs and news, you actually may want to have certain events impacting your bounce rate. So, for Calamuna blog, for example, we may want, if someone subscribes for a newsletter, we may want that to impact the bounce rate. We want the bounce rate to be lowered artificially because this event is impacting it. What I have seen happen is someone doesn't know about this. They implement scroll tracking. Scroll tracking happens across your entire website, everywhere, multiple times. So overnight, your bounce rate goes from 60% to 0 because every single event now counts towards the bounce rate. So I know that is confusing. I know that's a lot to process. When in doubt, true. Okay? Unless you have a very good reason for this event to impact your bounce rates, unless you've talked to your marketing stakeholders to make sure that this is how it should be, keep it to true. And for me, I definitely don't want a simple button click impacting my bounce rate. That is going to skew things. So it's by default false. You want to change that to true. The next one is, where is this data going to go to, right? We haven't specified that yet. So it's going to go to my GA settings. So I showed this to you guys a few minutes before where, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create this dynamic Google Analytics settings variable. You don't want to type it in. So never type anything in here. Don't override any events. Uncheck this, do it here. And then the trigger. So this is, when is this going to happen? This is the part that actually is the most confusing and the part that's going to require the most troubleshooting for you. But for the time being, what we're doing is relatively simple. So now it's the same process. We're going to say click, because that's what's happening. And then we're going to say get in touch. So keep in mind, naming conventions are important both for your tags and for your triggers. So we're going to put this in the same place, site tracking. And now the fun begins. So now you have to figure out, how am I actually going to make this thing work? So you have things that can fire on a page view. So the page loads. And that's definitely not the one we want, because we want an action. We want someone clicking on something. So we're going to use this, clicks. But also there's other things in here. So there's user engagement, like did something pop into their site? So element visibility, right? So it's the, I talked about this a second ago, where someone opts into your email marketing and nothing happens except for a little thank you message. And the only way to track that is through element visibility. You have other ones that are form submission, scroll depth, a few others. I won't really get into this. This is like, we'll get more into the advanced part. So for now, we want to just do links. That's all we want to track, because this is a link click, right? So this takes me to another page is a link click. funny enough, we can also track any click. So if I click on the top of this mountain, if I click on this cloud, I could track that, right? And I would track that through all elements. So sometimes you want to capture clicks on certain things on your site that are not links. They're just things, right? Maybe you have a picture and you want to capture clicks on a picture that doesn't go anywhere, or something that expands, right? So there's a bunch of interactivity on your site that you could track that is not just a link. So we'll stick to just link. I never check these things, okay? I don't wait for tags and I don't check for validation. If you read the documentation, it all sounds like something you should check, but it's not, because this is how you start getting problems where things slow down and just not gonna work. So you definitely don't want to trigger this on all link clicks. You want to be specific. You want to say, well, I don't want to fire this everywhere because it's specific to that one little button, right? So now we're going to say, how are we going to capture this information? So back into our debugger. Remember, when I clicked on it, these variables popped up, and look at what populated. So I have nothing I can use in click classes. Click elements, not really useful. Nothing in click ID, nothing in click target. But click text is actually good. I can use this. So I can say, fire my event when someone has clicked on a button that has a link, and the text is this. Now, it would have been nicer if we had a click class or an ID or a target that was defined. So this is sometimes where you will hit the limits of what Google Tag Manager can do. And sometimes you may want to ask a developer to, Mr. Developer or Mrs. Developer, can you add a click class for these things? Because that will help me create triggers. But for us, we have enough. We have this little click text. So I'm going to say the click text contains, you can say equals, that's fine as well. And I don't even need all of this. I just need the get in touch piece. And there's lots of options in here as well, right? So you may want to say, fire this, you want to match this little piece, something starts with something, something's added with something. You can do CSS selectors. You can do numbers, right? So something is greater or less than. There's a lot of complexity here. I'm not going to cover it. This is not meant for this session. This is just meant to sort of give you the idea that this is not as complicated as it needs to be. So you just say it contains. Keep it simple. There's also, you'll notice this minus and plus sign. So you may want it to meet two criteria, right? So maybe this is still too generic, get in touch. Maybe get in touch exists on all of your pages. It is a global module, and you only want to track it on one page. So when you click plus, this creates an and condition, not an or. Okay, I want to be very clear. There is a way to create or, that's trigger groups. This is and. So if I want to say only do this on get in touch, only do this on the home page, fine. So I'm going to, we'll keep it simple. I'm not going to do the and. We'll just say get in touch. So now we're going to save it. So now we've done our first tag. So this is the tag. It's going to fire CTA click. It's going to capture the page, and it's going to give us what did we click on. It's going to trigger when someone clicks on the link. And you see this add exception. I don't know if I can zoom in. Add exception. This is where your CCPA tags are going to work. Restart. This is where you're going to CCPA start will come into play. Meaning, add exception means do not. So everything above is fire when. Exception means don't fire if, for example, they have opted out of marketing cookies. So you're going to create an exception with a rule that says if they have opted out of marketing cookies, don't fire. So this is how you become CCPA compliant. In GTM, it is very simple. I'm not going to do that because there's no need for it for our sake. So we're going to save this. So now how do we know this actually worked? We're going to go into preview mode. We're already in preview, but I'll hit it again just to make sure. So now we're going to go down, always refresh, right? So we need to refresh the page. Refresh, we have a little debugger. And now you can do it two ways. You can do it through Data Slayer, or you can use the debugger. I like Data Slayer because for me, it's always sort of on the right-hand side, versus the debugger takes all the space at the bottom, so it's not super convenient. So you can see, for example, all these things have already fired. So the page view, the scroll tracking. And now we're going to control click on this. And hopefully what I've done works. It did. So you can see here, we now have CTA click. The action is dynamic, right? It's the home page. So this is combining the host name and the page path, which is blank because it's the home page. And the label is, we like making new friends, get in touch. So this is how we created our very first event tag. And then if you want to sort of get more advanced, you're then going to jump into Google Analytics, and you're going to say, and let's do that. Why do hypotheticals? Let's jump to GA. Go away. Yeah, I'll walk through GA in a second. I want to sort of finish off GTM before I jump into GA. Let's close this guy. Going to go into real-time reporting. So this is also another good way of QAing it, right? So you can do it in GTM through the debugger that comes with it. You can do it through the data slayer plugin that I mentioned. You can also use real-time events. And always go to this event that happened in the last 30 minutes. And you can see this one that we fired. So it works. Let me do that again. Let's go back to the home page. Let's make sure I have data slayer here. Click. So that fires, see here, CTA click, jump into analytics. There it is right there. All right, so you can see, well, and there's a whole bunch of events because people are using our site, but you can also CTA click, see how it's now 2. So we went from 1 to 2. So now we're good. Now we're like, yay, our event tagging works. So the only thing left to do for you is publish this. All right, so you leave preview mode and then you publish. And that is how you create tags, event tags in Google Analytics, in Google Tag Manager. In order to have basic tracking, the regular page views, it's much simpler than that. You just say page view. So right, we were using event. Now we're going to be using page view. You always reference your dynamic variable for your Google Analytics settings. And then you just trigger it based on everything, right? So it's all page views in the world globally. So the page view one, I didn't cover it because it's that simple. Events are a little bit harder to wrap your head around. So there's that. And in here, you can see there's all sorts of these tags in here. And I'll walk through a couple just to give you an example. So this event is for downloads. So here we can see downloads, the category. Action is where did the download happen? Label is what did they click on? The non-interaction hit is false because I think it's great that they downloaded it, but not enough to impact the bounce rate. It's gonna go it's made into my Google Analytics account. And firing triggers is when the click URL contains any one of these bazillion things. So notice that I'm not sure if you followed, but the container that I imported from that site, it's meant to. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about different things. Scratch that from the record. Anyways, so this tag is this trigger is relatively simple because it's just a regular expression of all the possible permutations of things people could download, not just in Calamuna, anywhere, right? So you have something like, you have JPEGs and gzip and FLV and EXE. Like there's a million different things in here. Basically, it just covers a range of everything imaginable. I did not come up with this. I stole this from somewhere, and it works great. And there's other ones in here, like, this is a scroll tracking one I talked about. So this is why it fires everywhere. Here, so this is where you define it. So I think, So Martina, to your question of, why are there two events why are these scroll tracking events firing multiple times? Is because that's how I want them to be. So I have defined for them to work on 25, 50, 75, and 90. You can define this however way you want. Okay, so you can do 10%. Just remember, you'll have a lot of events because everyone is going to see 10% of your page. Another thing to note is that you can actually do pixels. So it doesn't have to be relative. It can be absolute, meaning someone crossed 500 pixels, 600 pixels, whatever. Also, if you're fun, maybe your site is horizontal, right? So it doesn't go up, down, it goes side to side. You can do that as well. So you click horizontal scroll depth and you do all the same things. So you are able to define your own scroll tracking, whichever direction it follows. And video is implemented a little bit differently on this site. I did this implementation before Google Tag Manager created a native way to do this, right? So a lot of what I'm saying is some of this is outdated because this was done a couple of years ago for Calamuna, and GTM keeps rolling out new features, and now you don't need to create this complexity with attributes and data layer variables. Now you can just natively track all the YouTube. So when you embed YouTube on your site, you already have in GTM everything you need to track that. So you can, track plays, pauses, people are seeking, people are done, sharing, all of that is natively available through GTM. So it is very, very powerful. Here's an example of Hotjar, right? So this has nothing to do with Google Analytics anymore. Hotjar is a fantastic heat mapping tool. It's very affordable. And all you have to do to implement is this. How simple is that, right? I didn't need to add any custom HTML. I literally just said tag type is Hotjar, and this is a site ID that Calamuna uses, right? So it's very simple. And again, I realize I'm being somewhat facetious because I have years of experience in Google Tag Manager, but it's not as complicated as I'm leading you to believe, hopefully. There's also a lot of documentation. There's a lot of support for how to do this thing. So if you Google stuff, you will find answers. And usually when you start with the basics, right? You're going to get your page view tagging. You're going to get some event tagging. And as you get more comfortable with GTM, you'll sort of start building on that and building on that. So, in my presentation, remember that little diagram? GTM is build, right? So you build everything in GTM. And then you send data to Hotjar, to Google Analytics, to Google Ads, to Heap, to wherever you want it. You can also pause tags. So see that here? So it's quite good. So I'm going to pause there for a short bio break. Again, I'm drinking a lot of water, staying hydrated. So if you have questions, please feel free to post them now. When I come back, I'll answer them. And then we're going to switch over to Google Analytics. And I'm going to cover, actually, maybe you guys can write in the chat if you want me to cover Google Analytics or Google Data Studio next. It makes no difference to me. So let me know in chat, is it Data Studio or Google Analytics that you want me to cover next? Okay, so let's see. We have Data Studio 1, 2, 3. And we have analytics 1, 2, 3. So it's a tie. Nobody wins. To answer Henry's question of, are there various ways a user would opt out supported by GA? No, there's no way. What do we need to do for our clients to ensure compliance? So you will have to purchase a tool, a cookie management platform. There are many of them. A lot of them are very affordable, but there's not really a simple way to do it for Google Analytics. They recently released a tool for it. It's in beta. So I don't know how well it works. I have not used it, and all of our clients have their own separate platform, because usually you're not worried about just Google Analytics, you're worried about everything else as well. So if you have GA, you also are worried about Facebook, about Google Ads, about Pinterest, about any number of platforms. So you don't really want a solution just for GA, Henry. You would want it for everything. Okay, so I am going to, let's see, I'm going to jump into Data Studio, just because I think there is a lot more, there's a lot of webinars available for GA that are out there. And I want to cover a couple of things with Data Studio that I don't think have been covered well by other folks. So let's do that. We will jump to Data Studio. So now we are in Data Studio. I don't have a recommendation for a cookie management platform. I'm not making commission from anyone to make a recommendation. The ones that I've worked with is OneTrust, but that is usually reserved for pretty large enterprises. But OneTrust, TrustArc, they are the biggest ones in the market. But I'm not sure that smaller organizations would necessarily be able to afford them. I can do a little bit of research, Henry, for you. And if you ping me on LinkedIn or through Calamuna's site, just so I remember, because I will forget instantly, I can get back to you. Okay, so Google Data Studio. What is Data Studio? It is a replacement for these dashboards that are in analytics, which are absolutely terrible. And they're terrible, and Google knows that, and they don't even support them. So maybe 10 years ago, I used these things, and you would create these little widgets, and they looked ugly, and they were not flexible, and there was not much you could do with them. So Google knows that. They created a separate platform just for that. So enter Google Data Studio. Data Studio, when you sort of start with it, you really have nothing, right? But in the spirit of being lazy, I think a good analyst is a lazy one. You should always find ways to automate things, make things faster, more efficient, more streamlined. There's templates. There's lots of templates. So you have this template gallery, which is available to you sort of right away. But there's also, if you just look around, just Google, so many times I'm saying the word Google. Go into a search engine and write Google Data Studio templates. You will find lots of them. A lot of them are free. Some of them are paid. The paid ones are excellent. I have paid for several of them just because the amount of work that someone put into the paid ones is far more than the time that it would take me to do that. So I paid for them. So let's get started. Let's keep it simple for the time being. Let's use the templates that come with Data Studio, and I'll just click on this guy. So this is a sample report. If you want to make changes, you make a copy. But just to show you how easy it is, let's use the demo account. So this is the Google Merchandise Store. Remember the one that I talked about right at the very end of the slide deck, where Google has a demo store that anyone can get access to? So if you want to mess around and use real data and, not, let's say, maybe you have a site that has a small site, doesn't have a lot of traffic, but you still want to see if certain visualizations will make sense for you, use this. Use the merchandise store. Add it. So now you can see I've done nothing, and I already have a ton of great data, right? So I have this date range filter. This is nice. I got users and sessions and page views and bounce rate. You can see some trends. You can see where people are coming from. You can hover over all of these different things. You can build different types of charts. So line charts, bar charts, pie graphs, stacked graphs, tables, maps. And the maps can go down to the city level. So you can zoom in on your state. You can, because a lot of us won't necessarily care about the world. We care about maybe California, and then in California you'll actually see the counties. So it's quite nice. So I always say with everything, just like with GTM, import a recipe, use the GTM bot tool, start with something. Same thing with creating something in Data Studio. Start with something. Don't try to, build something from scratch, because it'll be a frustrating experience versus, click and use a template. We'll keep using their own data, but now we'll be able to make changes to it. So now I'm actually in their interface, right? So you'll see it's made a copy. I actually can access this now. So if I go to view, it's what we're looking at before, edit, now I can make changes. I can make changes to the theme. All right, so notice how all of these different things change. Now, I don't really care. This is a demo. It doesn't matter what it looks like. What cares is the functionality, right? So we're going to get into that. Get used to the interface, right? So you can create multiple pages for your dashboard. You can create multiple data sources. This is the reason I want to cover this now versus Google Analytics, because everything's Google Analytics has sort of already been covered, but this part is really important. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to add your Google Analytics, right? And we've already done this, but this is what it looks like. So you'd find your account in here, and you will see what you have access to. So however way you're logged into Data Studio is what you will see show up in Google Analytics. So for us, we can connect to, where's the demo account from Google, the merchandise store, and this master view. And then all you do is hit add. It will make its connection. It'll say, are you sure you want to do that? I'm going to say yes. And now it's here. So now we have our first data source. But let's say that's not good enough for you. Now you want to have Google Ads data, and you should. Or you want to have, some other type of data in here. Let's say you want to have Facebook. Cool. Let's type Facebook. And what you notice is, well, you can't get Facebook data in Data Studio by default. There are no Google connectors, but you do have lots of partner connectors. So this is what Google has done is it's created this third-party marketplace for all of these other vendors to provide data sources. So now my favorite and the most affordable one is Supermetrics. Let's jump to their site. So this is Supermetrics. They have a number of different products. They have Supermetrics for Google Sheets, for Excel, for Data Studio, for BigQuery, for Snowflake. I care about Data Studio, so I'll do that. So what this helps me do is basically Supermetrics becomes the intermediary between a million different platforms that I want to get data out of and Google Data Studio. So they've changed their site, and it's not as intuitive as it used to be. Let me see, templates. Okay, good enough. So this is showing us in not the way that I wanted to, but sort of the data sources that Supermetrics can connect to. So it can connect to, let's say this is Bing, right? So you're using Bing. Here's a template for you that Supermetrics has created, and you just say use template, and Bing, you'll be connected to Bing, right? That's all you have to do. We have the same things for Facebook. Oh, I like this little styling that I have here. So here you have your cost impressions, your clicks, your actions. So all of your data coming out of Facebook ads. This is the paid version of Facebook, right? Not the, there is a way to connect like the social stuff. They have a connector for that as well. This is the paid one. So what I'm trying to say is you can see here Facebook ads, Facebook page, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can sort of research this on your own, but there's a million different ways to get other data sources into Data Studio, and you want that, right? So when you start, you're probably going to just do Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and maybe Google Ads. Those are sort of the most common ones that we set up. And you can do YouTube as well in here. But if you know, you have a budget and you do media spending, I highly recommend you bring all your data in here, because your media agency could be reporting on certain things, but it's gonna be so much nicer when you have access to everything in near real time, right? So this is fresh up to, I think, 12 hours or so, and you can change that. You can make it fresher if you want to, but for now it's fine. We're gonna stick to Google Analytics. This is okay. One caveat that I want to mention is that this user metric, this will never work for you. And I'm actually somewhat upset at Google for including this, because there is a data aggregation issue between Google Analytics and Google Data Studio for specifically that user metric. It will be close, but if you've ever tried to show users between Data Studio and GA, it will never match. So don't worry about it. You're not doing anything wrong. There is a data aggregation issue which has been there for years and it still has not been fixed. So I actually don't include users in my dashboard, because people will start asking questions. Vadim, did you break something? Which usually is the case, but not this time. So don't include users. These are sort of the KPIs, little scorecards they have created. And on the next page, we'll try to recreate some of this so you can see sort of where you go in this interface to make some of these things. But again, like I was saying earlier, it's really nice to have something to start with, right? So you're not just creating things from scratch. You can also do this. You can do Google Data Studio templates. And then you have, you know, Data Studio by default, but you'll have other websites which will show up, and you can import their templates, right? So let's say I'm an analyst, which apparently I am. So then you can import this thing. So you want to get this template, blah, blah, blah. Where's the link? Let's see. There it is. Okay, so now, oh boy. Let's change this to the demo account. So at this point, I've done nothing. I've taken someone else's template. And most of these have these data little drop down to insert your own data. It's more for the demo. You're not really going to use this ever for yourself, but it's for the demo purposes. So now you can see, you know, someone's created this thing. There's a little bar chart. Again, they use users. I never do. And it's actually not that important to use that. They've given you some instructions of how to make a copy of this if you want to use it for yourselves. So it's neat, right? There's, you know, you don't need to recreate all of this stuff. You can just use somebody else's, play around with it. What I used to do, I used to grab multiple pieces from different templates and put them all together. So I would say, you know, I really like the way this person has done this. I like the formatting on that. I don't love this piece or that piece. So I would make copies of them and I would just merge all of it together into a Frankenstein. And that's how, you know, my dashboards used to look really ugly. They don't anymore. But when I started, they were terrible. And yours will be too, and that's fine. Not a big deal. You can see, this is this guy. Let's see. Let's close that out. And there's other ones, right? So this site is, you know, another aggregator of these different templates. So there's Google Analytics. This one is for, looks like Google Search Console. There's other ones I'm sure that are going to be in here for Facebook, for Google Ads. So there's a template for almost everything, okay? But sometimes a template is not going to cut it. You'll still want to customize things yourself. So for example, so this is sessions. I'm going to move this over here. And now I'm going to say, you know what? I want to include the number of pages people visit in a session. And I have a couple of different ways of doing that. So I can do it through here, through add a chart. So that's what we'll do. You have different chart types. So you have your tables, you have your scorecards, lots and lots of other ones. I'm not going to cover all of them. There's lots. And Google is adding more and more charts. So for example, the tree map didn't exist not that long ago. Bullet is a really useful one for targets. All right. So if you want to say, if you're soliciting donations and if you have access, which I know a lot of you guys don't because it's usually a third-party platform, but if you have access to the donations amount, you can create a bullet chart saying this is where we're at now and this is where we need to be. So if you need to report to your executives to say, you know, are we meeting our targets? bullet charts are really, really handy. But in our case, we want to just display something relatively simple. We'll just do the scorecard, put it in here. And now it's by default, you know, it's guessing. It's kind of guessing, like, what do you think you want to display? Page views. All right, well, I don't want to display page views. I want to display pages per session. So I type in pages, there it is. I click and I drag. That's it, right? So now I have pages per session. Now you'll notice that these other charts, they have this nice little percentage change. That's useful, right? So you want to know, like, in this time period, September 14th to whatever, are things getting better or worse? So one thing I will do is I will take this date range and I will actually just say the last 30 days and I hit apply. So now this date picker has changed. I'll show you how are they getting to this percent change in this page views. They are using this default date range. It's auto, meaning it is referencing this date picker. And sometimes you may not want it to be auto. Sometimes you want to do a year-to-date chart. And that will conflict with the picker you have up here. So you'll say custom, and you'll just choose whatever date you want. For us, it's fine. So now you're going to go in here, and it's going to say the last 30 days, excluding today. And also, you always want to exclude today because the data is not complete. There's no point to compare it. And you're going to say, I want to compare it to either the previous period. So it's going to take the 30 days before September the 14th. You can do the previous year, right? So often we compare year-over-year results. So you can do that. You can also get into some advanced logic. So you can say, well, I want it to be today minus a certain amount of days, weeks, quarters. So you can get pretty fancy. We'll keep it simple and just say previous period, and automatically picks August 15th to September 13th. Hit apply. And now we've got our little 4.5% increase. Okay. There's also some styling work that we can do. So we can do conditional formatting, and this is also a new functionality. So maybe the percent change that we would like of the values. So this 5.25, maybe that's bad. Maybe we want it to be 10. So we can say select condition where it's greater than, you know, I'll use 5 just so we can see it for this for our case. I want the text to be green, this green, like a swamp. And actually no, not and, or value is less than, let's be 5, 2. I want it to be, let's see, I actually don't remember how to do this, but anyways, let's pretend this is fine. We'll hit save, and then we'll change to the swampy color that I chose. So there's ways to highlight certain things so it's visually easier to see. You can do the same thing within tables, right? So if sessions hits a threshold over 500, if you do a percentage share, you can say if something makes up more than 5% of something. So there's a lot of things you can do with conditional formatting to make it really useful. You can also flip charts. So let's say, for example, you don't like the way that this is looking. You can, in styles, so you also, in all of your widgets, that's what I'm calling it, you got 2 tabs, your data and your style. So you can flip it, right? If you prefer to look at it this way, you can expand the viewable area. You can choose colors. You can make these stacked, although you should never stack these specific metrics because one is a subset of the other. You can show data labels. You can do, so whenever you're doing percentages, so if you want to do the conversion rates, you want to have 2 axes, because what you're going to have is, here it's fine, but you may want to have 2 axes to show, let's say, the number of sessions and then e-commerce conversion rate, and you're going to have that on 2 axes. And we'll build some of these in a second. I think we have an hour and a half left. Jada, is that right? We have an hour and a half? Just want to confirm. Just want to make sure we're not super short on time, so I can show you sort of everything. Pie charts, again, we can change these Yeah, so we can change these based on slice order, and you can also determine your own values. So see how this pie chart is changing colors? So if you have brand colors, for example, you can go in and you can pick them. That's fine. You can change the size of the hole in the donut. So it goes from pie to donut to that. There is some level of formatting that you can do with the fonts, not a ton. So we often get client requests for, hey, can you use the font dictated by my brand? Maybe. If it's one of these, there's nothing I can do in terms of custom. And there's plenty of fonts here, and most people will be covered, but not always. So now let's actually start trying to build something. And also, guys, if you have specific things you want to see from Data Studio, if you have specific questions for Data Studio, throw them in the chat. This is very much an informal demo. I'm just creating stuff on the fly. So if you have questions, if you want to see something, throw them in the chat and I'll do that. So we're going to add a page. And this is now a blank page, right? So we're going to start inserting stuff. But before we do that, let me actually get rid of this first page. So I'm going to delete it. Goodbye page. So now we have nothing. So this is how you would see it. You would start from scratch. And the first thing I always do is layout, right? You may not think about it, but the layout is actually really important because there are people that will want to print this. There are people that may want to display this on monitors of a certain size. Maybe you go into your office whenever that is open and you have a big screen, or maybe there's an executive with a big screen and you want to display the Data Studio chart and it's always there, it's always live, it's always updating. You may want to consider, before you create anything, the layout of this thing, right? So what is the size of the canvas? Is it standard 4x3? Is it 16:9? Is it something custom? You have these smart guides, you got this grid. So you may want to determine that. There are some theme options that you may also want to do. I usually do it after the fact, the theming stuff, like how it's going to look. I want to get sort of the raw data in there first. And for layout, again, it just really depends what you're trying to do. So if someone is going to be using this on a computer, you can make them really long because someone's going to be able to scroll. If you're going to be projecting it, you want it all to fit on one page and then just go through pages. So it really depends on how you want to do it. So let's start with controls. So let's see. The two most common ones that I use are date range controls. Oh, hold on, I'm not seeing. There we go. Martina, so to answer your question, yes, I use Data Studio. Oh, well, sorry. I'll use both of them. They have very different use cases. So I use Data Studio for my health check, for my overview of, is everything working the way that it should? And if I see a dip, a giant spike, I'm like, uh-oh, something happened. What is it? I'm not going to have the answer to what is it in Data Studio, but I will have that in analytics. So I use Data Studio for my sort of high-level reporting, and I use analytics to drill into certain things to figure out if this is working or that is not working. So the first thing I always do is date control. Because you always want, oops, not that, date range, sorry, date range. So you want to be able to control your dates, and then you change them in here. So by default, it goes to auto date range. No idea what that means. I always change it to, I mean, you have a lot of options here, right? So you can do, depending on how you're reporting, you can do this week, this month, starting Monday, starting Sunday, blah, blah, blah. I pick usually the last 28 or 30 days, just depends. So then it picks it for you. I never check this. I already mentioned this. Do not include today. That is incomplete data. So now we've set that. You can also work on the styling if you want. So you can create borders and fonts. So you can change this to railway. You can change this to like that if you want to be super fancy, whatever you want, right? Let's start inserting things. So we're going to add a chart. What does this thing do? This is shapes, I think. Oh, this is community. Oh, this is cool. This is actually something I did want to cover. So Google Data Studio by default gives you a lot of functionality in terms of charts, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes you want to create a funnel. So you want to see how people are moving from, let's say, your home page to your product page to your demo page. Bad example. You have community visualizations, meaning other people have created things that we can use. So let's go there before we create anything. And these are super cool. Like, I have to say, people are awesome, and they create things that look really good. So you have these fancy date pickers, you have these sunburst charts, you can do funnel charts, right? So you can do animated bar charts. So there's a lot of things that are in here. You can do heat maps and funnels, histograms, waterfall charts. So I used to work at American Express many, many moons ago, and our reporting used to use waterfall charts. So we're trying to see, you know, what percentage of something is this or that, and how is it changing over time. So waterfall charts would be really useful. Henry, that's a good question, very granular. So I probably won't cover that today, but we'll see how far we get in the presentation. But keep that in the back of your mind. Shoot me an email. It's vadim@calamuna.com. So if you want to send me that internal search queries question, just shoot it over. So that is community visualizations. Basically, this means that if you're not happy with what Google and Google Data Studio provides by default, you also have other people that have built things that you can use. But for the time being, we're going to keep things simple. So we're going to start with our time series chart. And we're going to say, I want to see how many sessions are coming to my site. So you have two ways of getting there. You can click on this thing on new users and just type in sessions. So that will just sort of swap it. There it is. Or you can also do it here, which I prefer because it gives you a lot of real estate, and you can click and drag it over here, right? So now you got double the sessions. So now you go to view, boom. So that's what it looks like. Great, beautiful. Not a Data Studio tip, but more of a data visualization tip. All of this formatting that it does, these sort of lines that are going horizontally and vertically, that is distracting, okay? Get rid of that. So we're going to go into style, and we are going to go to grid, and I'm going to say, where are you? Grid color, access color, grid. So we're going to say transparent, okay? So now you still have all the same data. You could still hover over everything and see what it is. You now don't have anything that is distracting. So let's make this a little bit more complicated. Now you want to see sessions, not as a giant line chart, but as let's say it's split by device. So we go here, we're going to go Control C, Control V. We have another chart, which is the same thing. And now we're going to split it by device. The one caveat I have to say is you have to know what the fields are called, right? It's a bit annoying. And you may want to have, Google does have a little library of how all of these things are called, but you have to sort of be able to figure out what you're even looking for. So now we're going to add a second, that's all right. We're going to do drill down, go away. So you can do that, which was not at all what I wanted. Go back, go back, go back. Why are you doing count? Strange. Go away. Okay, that's what I wanted. So now we've added a breakdown dimension. So we're still looking at by date. It's no different from this chart. The totals are still exactly the same, but now we have the ability to look at the impact of desktop versus mobile versus tablet, right? So you can hover over and you can see peaks and valleys in terms. So you can see, for example, tablet makes no difference. It doesn't exist, which is the case for most clients. Desktop is number one by far and away, and then you have mobile. You can also start seeing trends in here, right? So, you know, Martina, for example, your question of when do you use Data Studio versus Analytics? When you see these kind of dips and you don't know why they're happening, you will go into Google Analytics and you will try to find a way. Now, this is just weekends, so we know this is okay and normal. But if it wasn't a weekend, if you would see a giant dip in the middle of the week, then you would go into Analytics and look into it. So that's cool. All right, so now we got split by devices. Let's make a copy of that, and we want to get a little bit more. So now we want to look at channels. So we can look at default channel group. So instead of device category, we're going to bring in default channel group. So now, let's bring that in here. So now we can see all of these different channels, right? So let's go to view. So you can see, for example, what was this? This was direct. So direct saw a huge spike on October the 9th, and then it sort of dipped down, but it keeps being quite large. And that is alarm bells in your head as an analyst, because if you look at direct here, which is this light cyan line, I'm not trying to point on my screen, the direct line is quite low. So it's averaging, you know, just under 500 sessions, and then boom, 9th, it triples to 1687. So this is how Data Studio is used, right? So you would look at that and you should start getting worried of why is this happening? And usually when you see an increase in direct traffic, unless you're a utility, if you're not a utility, usually it's broken paid advertising. If you're a utility, your direct traffic probably makes up most of your traffic already, because these are people that are coming to your site once a month, they're paying their bills, they're doing whatever they need to. So that is normal. But this would not be normal. Now, instead of seeing an anomaly like this in a week or in 2 weeks in Data Studio, depending on your reporting cadence, there is a feature in Google Analytics called alerts. And a lot of people don't get to it, and even I often don't. But in your admin settings, in each view, it's down to the view level, you have this ability to set up custom alerts. And if you've experienced problems in the past, you may want to make sure they don't repeat in the future. You're going to set up an alert, and you're going to say traffic decline direct. Okay, and I'm going to say for this view, or you can apply it to all the views. So, you know, if like me, you're managing lots of clients, you'll want to apply it to all the clients that you have over a period of a day, because usually these things do happen day over day. I want to send an alert to myself when not traffic, but let's say what do I have available here? Okay, well, not everything is available here, but let's say sessions percent decreases or increases, both are sort of worrying. Decreases by, let's say, 50% from the previous day, you could say, or from the same day in the previous week, or the previous year. So this is useful when you have a campaign that's launched, for example, to see if people are hitting your site. Also useful just as a precaution. So if, and I've seen this happen too, you know, developer by accident remove your Google Tag Manager container or your Google Analytics account, if it's hard-coded, your traffic is going to go to 0. You're not going to know until the next time you log in. Could be in a week, could be in 2 weeks, could be in a month. I've seen all of it. This way, when traffic decreases, so when sessions decrease by more than 50% from the previous day, and you could do this, you know, you can say, let's say 95% from the previous day, send me an alert. You may want to do 95 because realistically, like we saw here, you do have peaks and valleys, right? So on the weekends, your traffic does decline significantly by more than 50%. So you want to play around with the thresholds. So this is how you sort of do these things. There's a bunch of things in here. So source medium, for example. So if you're expecting, so if your source matches direct, so direct traffic. So in this case, for example, and this is pretty generic, but you would actually want to set it up because direct, if something breaks, it always goes into direct. So you may want to monitor if direct increases by 50% from the week before. So for us, this would have definitely happened. So this alert would have happened. So if source is direct and the sessions from that source are increasing by more than 50% from the previous week, or it's the same day in the previous week, however you want to configure it, that would send us an alert in both cases. Because usually the share of direct is pretty constant. If it spikes, it means something's broken. So alerts are really, really useful. I would highly encourage you guys to all use it. There's really no downside. I mean, the only downside is you may get more alerts than you want, and then you may want to adjust the thresholds. Now, let me do something else. Sometimes you want to have a chart and you don't want to have 3 charts, right? I don't want to have a chart just for mobile devices and just for all my channels. So I'm going to go edit. I'm going to add another controller. And this time for a, let's see, we'll make dropdown. Why not? Okay. So by default, it says date. We're going to change that. So we're going to say device. I'm going to bring that in. And one thing I want to see, there's all these little settings of like show values and compact numbers. That's not really, come on, go back. Wrong place. So by default, it would have been something like, oops, like this. So this is what would like this filter would look like by default. So you have device category, you could click into it, and then it would show you your tablet, mobile, and desktop. If you don't want to show this, because you just want this to be a filter, you don't want this to be a reporting function by itself, you go in here, and then just say, don't show me the values, that's it. So now you can say, I only want to see desktop traffic. Everything updates. So now this old chart, the roll-up chart that we had, this device chart looks the same, right? So you only have desktop, no longer 3 lines. And all of your channels have now changed to only desktop. So this is only traffic from desktop. You can do the same thing for just mobile. You can combine them. So see how it's loading. So for example, you can see there's a peak here. So again, Martina, to your question of when would you use GA versus GDS, like this. So you see there's a peak here on September 30th coming from mobile. I don't know why that's happening. You go a little bit down, it's the same. And actually, this almost gives us the answer of why. Look what happened. So organic search plummeted and direct increased. So my guess is that there must have been some sort of an algorithm changed because Google itself, Google's own store was decimated by this. And actually, funny enough, we had a client that asked us about this and I was about to research this, but now I have the answer, which is fantastic. And then let me make one more filter. I'm gonna make it up here. I'm gonna make it a little smaller. And instead of device category, I'm gonna do channels. I'm gonna throw in there. So now you have 3 filters, right? You have what channels are people coming from, what devices are they using, and when are they doing all of this activity. So now if I want to isolate people on only desktop, only on organic search, I can do that. And like these all look the same, which means it's working. But now my roll-up chart would look this way. And if I do all of them, so now you can see this one. So this is the roll-up. This is the one split by device. And it's only specific to organic search. And on the one that is by channel, you can only see organic search. So that means all of our filters are working. Okay. Now you may want to have other pages, right? So one page is not really enough. You're gonna add another page and you're gonna name your pages. So you're gonna hit this little guy and you're gonna rename it and you're gonna say overview. And then you're gonna say, you know, device analysis. Great. Now, one thing that's kind of annoying is, where is everything? Where are my filters? I want my filters to be global. So my filters are here, but they didn't make their way onto the second page. So let's make a change to that. Let's go on my page, my first page. I'm gonna right click, and this little guy saying it, make report level. So I'm gonna make this report level. I'm gonna make this report level, and I'm gonna make this report level. So now, when I go into my second page, they're here. And this is the same way how you create like pretty headers and pretty footers. You basically create boxes, color the boxes, put in your brand in there, and make them report level. And that way you will have the same formatting on every single page. Now, one thing is you'll notice is the spacing between these is ugly, right? Like, oh, look at that, like giant gap in here, almost no gap in there. They're all sort of different heights. So there's ways to fix that. So you select all of them, right click, and then you have all this aligning and ordering that you can do. So I'm gonna align vertically to top, which is already top, but let's pretend like this is over here and this is over there. And you wanna do smart grid, but it's easier to just do it this way. So you're gonna go top, and then you're gonna distribute them horizontally. I'm not sure if you noticed, I'll do that again. So let's say this thing is over here, you know, super ugly, can't see anything. I'm gonna select all of this, right click, distribute horizontally. So it basically, it finds the spacing and takes the outermost objects and puts whatever you have. It works for however many objects you have. It makes them look nice. So now everything's aligned, right? So we have our filters, great. Now let's do a little bit of branding. We're gonna insert, and we're gonna insert a box. We're not gonna create anything fancy. A little box. It's gonna be gray. I don't want it to be gray. I want it to be pink. Actually, it's a bit too bright for me. Make it a little bit lighter. I'm gonna put it up here. And then you're gonna say, oh no, where did all of our beautiful stuff went? So this is ordering, right? So you have, it's kind of like Photoshop where you have different layers. Data Studio does the same. So you can right click on your object and you have order. So you can bring it to front, bring it to back. So we're gonna bring this thing to the back. And we're gonna send it backwards. And obviously it's not gonna work because I'm doing this. So let's make these things. Bring to front. Yes, maybe, no, okay. Well, anyways, I'm doing something wrong, but why are you doing this to me? Anyways, this usually works. Obviously it doesn't because you're all staring at me, but usually you would do this and you send it to back and it would all look just fine. But let's forget about that for now. So let's make some charts. Charts. So let's make a pie graph. And it's gonna guess at what we want it to do, right? I definitely don't want to do whatever it's doing. I'll stick to simple things. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do something else. Let's do internal. Let's do a table. And let's do, I'm not sure if this account has it, search term. And let's do, let's find it here. Totally unique searches, there it is. Okay, well, that's not super useful, but that's all that the sample store has. Let's see if, what will that do? Let's see. Okay, so this is one of Calamuna's clients. They have search on their site, internal search. They are utility. So you can see, for example, the kind of things people are searching for. To change meters, and people are searching for disconnecting things, for emergencies, for auto paying. Henry, your question was dissect internal search engine lead to page clicks. Let's see. So you would do, so to dissect this, you would do pages after search, I think it's called. I forget what the metric is called. Search, destination, query term, site search status, maybe? Nope, none of those. Percent of search exits, that might be it. Search refinements. Okay, so this is showing you what did people search for, the unique number of times that was searched, the percent of exits, meaning they left after that search, and the percent of search refinements, meaning they looked into it again, so they kept refining. So maybe meter change wasn't what they were looking for, they did for something else. But let's use an example that is a bit more common for everyone. So I'm going to create another table, and I just want to look at what are the most popular pages on my site. So I'm going to have this little table, and I'm going to switch my data source to sample. So I'm not going to use page title. I'm going to use the page URL itself. My metric is going to be pages or page views, sorry. Okay, so at the most basic level, we now have what are the pages that people access in the Google Merchandise Store? How many times do they see them? Now is when we start adding things, right? So now we want to see, okay, well, this is kind of good. I want to sort things also by page views. I don't know why I didn't sort by pages by default, but sort by page views. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add page views again. And you may be asking, well, why are you doing that? We already have this. But what I want to do is I want to do a little bit of calculation to it, nothing fancy. So in here, in this pill, you can click on this. See this little pencil? Click on the pencil. You can rename things. And I'm going to rename it to percentage share of, if I could spell in English, of page views. And now you can also determine, is this going to be a number? Well, yeah, it's going to be a number, but it's going to be a percent. Cool. Well, none of that makes sense. And what is it actually doing? So I want to do a percent of total corresponding to the data that I have available to me. So now what I've done is I've also shown you not just page views, but actually how important is that in the grand scheme of things. So you may say something like, you know, this sign in page is number 8. It makes up this many page views. And actually, this page views makes up 2.6% of all the page views on our entire site. You can start doing things like, let's see, let's park this one and let's create another chart and let's start looking at e-commerce maybe, because I just want to show you a little bit of formatting, and then we'll do another maybe, let's say 10 minutes of this, and we'll jump over to Google Analytics, and then we'll leave time for Q&A. So in here, we're gonna look at conversion rate. E-commerce conversion rate, great. We're gonna look at this by channel, by default channel group. We're gonna look at this metric by sessions. One thing I wanna explain, I think it's really important, is we have different scopes of metrics and pages, meaning that if you're looking at a page, you're gonna be looking at page views. If you're looking at something like device or where they came from, things that are higher level, that is a session, right? So you could bring in page views in here, but it's not gonna make sense. Because for example, an organic search generates one session and everything under all the page views ladder up to that. So be careful when you're mixing different metrics. Keep in mind the scopes of those metrics. So if you have, again, you know, mobile, if you're looking at devices, channel groups, those are all session based because that stays for your entire session. It's not tied to a page. And if you're looking at things like time on page, page views, that is down to the page level. So here we have sessions and we have e-commerce conversion rates. And again, this is not a ton of data, but that's okay. So you can see, for example, organic search is 0.1% conversion rate, direct is 0.12% conversion rate. Let's make our lives a little bit easier. Let's add some conditional formatting. So there's a number of different ways we can do that. First of all, we can make this column, so instead of decimals, we want to have 2 decimal places, so now it's consistent. We can change which side it's wrapped on. We can change it to a heat map. That's nice, right? That makes life easier. I can change to whatever color I want. I can also change this to a bar. And with the bar, I can add my conversion rate back in here, right? So this makes your visualizations a little bit easier. Now, heat map is good, but maybe you're not trying to compare the results. You want to have a parameter saying, I only care about conversion rate over 1 or 0.1, right? So then we're going to get rid of this. We're going to go to conditional formatting. Single color on the field, which is conversion rate. Condition is going to be greater or equal to 0.1. And then color it green. Save. Come on. What did you not like? E-commerce greater than or equal to. Not the row. Oy vey. Okay, well, let's go with sessions. Color scale. Does that work? Let's see what that works. Okay, that kind of works. Anyways, I'm not sure why it wasn't working before. Probably I was off of my decimals, but you can do color scales like this, and you can modify. So there's a lot of things you can do to make your lives a lot easier. So Data Studio, really the things I wanted to cover are, one, use templates to get started. They make your life a lot easier. If you want to add extra data sources, which you should, use Supermetrics. There's lots of other plugins. I'm not getting paid by Supermetrics to say that. They're the most common one. They're also the most affordable. So use Supermetrics if you want to bring in more data. You have the ability to blend your data. So for example, if you want to take your Google Analytics data and blend it to Facebook, blend it on date, for example, you can see your spend in Facebook increasing and your, let's say, sessions and conversion rate also increasing in Google Analytics. So there's ways to blend different data sources as long as you have access to them. And I keep mentioning these online platforms, but you can bring in things from Excel. You can bring in things from a database. So if you have if you solicit donations, for example, and you have a third-party platform and it's hard to get anything out of that platform, fine. But you can still export out of that platform, bring that data into Google Sheets or a database for added security, and then Google Data Studio can connect to that database, right? So then you can still bring in your donations data, your enrollment data, your financial data. I don't recommend the financial part of it. So there's different ways of doing it. Different data sources you can bring in, and that makes Data Studio really powerful. And Data Studio is amazing for what it is. It is a free tool, right? Let's not forget that. We do have clients that use tools like Tableau, Power BI. I've used Zoho Analytics myself. So there's lots of other platforms out there, but they're all paid. And some of them are affordable, like Zoho Analytics is pretty good for what it does. There's other ones that are like Tableau and Power BI where they can get expensive really quickly. So Data Studio is a great free tool that automatically integrates with the rest of the Google stack. And for $100 a month, It can integrate with Supermetrics and give you access to a ton of other data sources. I showed you a little bit of the interface for Data Studio. Again, this is not meant to be sort of all-encompassing, show you every single feature in Data Studio. That's impossible even in 3 hours because there is so much. So one of the things I did want to show you before I sort of move on to GA is if you have certain ways that you want to manipulate your data or add things, you can also create custom. I can't do it in this data source because it's not mine, but you can create custom dimensions and custom metrics in Data Studio. So if you want to modify this default channel grouping and you want to blend things together, so maybe you want to just say, here's all the paid channels, here's all the free channels. You can do that. You can create a custom dimension. You create a formula. It's very flexible. So pretty much anything you may want to do, Data Studio will probably do that for you. Okay, it has some, it may not be easy, but most use cases are possible. It's really only when you get into complex use cases where it starts sort of showing its weakness. But again, for a free tool, I think this thing is amazing. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to have a sip of water. I'm going to stretch. I'm going to jump into GA. If you have any questions that you want me to show you for GA, let me know. I'm basically going to walk you guys through what a good implementation of GA should look like. So I don't really have specific objectives, but I'm going to go through goals, filters, alerts we already covered, modifying custom channel groupings. And I'm looking at this sheet of what I was actually supposed to talk about. I think that covers most of it. So I'm going to give myself just a minute break, and you guys as well. So I'm going to stop this for a second. So yeah, so if there's anything you want me to cover in Google Analytics, just write that in the chat, please. Okie dokie, I am back. So now we're going to go and jump into Google Analytics, and we're going to slowly move to the finish line of this webinar. Thank you all for sticking around so far. I know this has been long and at times painful. So let's get into it. Let's start with the settings, because I think most people just jump into the interface without really understanding what we have access to. So the way that Google Analytics is structured is you have an account, a property, and a view. I don't know if you can see the bottom part. So this is our account. It's Calamuna. A whole bunch of people have access to it. Then we have properties, right? So we have one property. So this is the specific piece of code that you will put into Google Tag Manager where all the data from your site will go into. So that's a property. And you may have different properties, right? So you may want to, let's say you have an intranet, and you may want to track that information. And you have your sort of external site. You may want to track that with different properties, because there's really no relation in terms of how your internal users are using it versus how public are using it. So an example would be for a university, right? So you have your, Cambridge.com, whatever, and that's your one property. And you have your faculty and staff using internal resources, and that could be your intranet, and that would be a different property. because there's really no reason to mix the two. They're completely different people using it for very different purposes. So that's why you'd want to have different properties. And then you have your views. And this is where most implementations show their weakness. So a lot of times when you create Google Analytics, it will give you one view and it will just say all website data. And you'll keep using that because you haven't been to this webinar. But what you want to have is at least 3 different views, at a minimum 3 views. You have your main site data where you've applied filters and goals and everything's beautiful and set up and you're excluding query parameters that are garbage. That's your main view. Your staging is, and hopefully this is the case for your organization, but you have a separate staging site. So you don't just make changes and they're live. You make changes on your staging environment, you test them, and then you push them live. So your staging view will only work there. And then you have your raw data, 0.6. So this is completely unmodified, completely untouched, sort of as a backup if things fail. Now, we at Calamuna have multiple ones. We have one for the job boards, one for the blog. We have a roll-up, which includes everything. We have one for calamuna.ca. We have another one for calamuna.com. So there's lots of them, right? You have, in the free version of Google Analytics, it's 20 views or 25, I can't remember, 25 views, I think. If you purchase Google Analytics 360, which is, I think, at a minimum $150,000 US a year, that doesn't matter. You get a ton of views. You can do whatever you want. But in the free version, you get 25. So at least, at a bare minimum, use 3. Main view, staging, raw. Now, oftentimes I see this and I chuckle because you see something like a main view, but there's no filters in that view. So someone will create a view, call it something, and expect it to work. But that's not how it works. You need filters. Filters are the things that separate your data. So in this view, we have a filter to only include Calamuna traffic. So you can see this is an include filter with a host name based on blah, 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 blah. So Calamuna and Zendesk. Zendesk is our support for our clients. I'm going to cancel for now. I'll show you the roll-up because that's where we do most of our stuff. There's a few in here as well. So you can see this is just excluding all of the staging. So you can see localhost and SJWC, things like .test .something. So all these filters are in here. You also want to have goals, right? Every view should have goals. So your contact us form submits, your newsletter opt-ins, phone clicks, scrolling, sharing. Let me jump to a different view. Let me go to the demo account. I have a few things over there that are, obviously the Google Store has slightly more traffic than we do. So they have done this master view, test view, raw data view, right? That's what I was saying. In the master view, they have filters. And I actually don't like their filters. The only things they're doing is including host name. So I guess, sorry, to backtrack, the only filter they have is just to include their host name, and that's it. So this works if you have one variation of your host name with no like subdomains and anything weird going on, which is not usually the case. And then they're doing a search and replace filter for AdWords. No idea what this does. You'd have to ask them. But they created 3 views. In the raw data view, you will see no filters. Oh, guys. Oh, really? Ooh, okay, that's bad. Okay, well, Google's not following their own advice. That's cool. So this should have been different. So in the views here, they should have had their staging domains, their testing domains in test and nothing in raw. What did you have for exclude traffic? I'll show that to you in a second. So they probably have it. I hope they have it. Let me go here. So there is, so this view, and obviously I don't have access to this. You won't have access to this as well. This is just how Google has done it. There is this little button here for bot filtering. Okay. And it's good. It's not 100%. I can guarantee you this is not 100%. So if you think by clicking this button that all the bots are now gone, not the case. There's also no silver bullet. There is no solution. I've seen lots of like these little regular expressions, which are trying to weed out host names, and it may work, but everybody's is so different. What you should look into is where the traffic is coming from. So sometimes I had a client that traffic was coming from, I think, Brazil, and it was coming through Amazon Web Services. And we don't have any clients, or there's no reason for anyone to come from Brazil or from Amazon Web Services. That is not a normal, like, you as a consumer, you do not use Amazon Web Services as your internet provider. You use AT&T or Cogeco or whatever exists in the States. I'm from Canada, I don't know. So it's weird to see Amazon as a provider and people coming from Brazil. So there is some analysis you'll have to do to figure out, is there traffic in here that's garbage that I need to include or exclude? So this is the first start. This is easy, but it is not 100%. There's some linking in here that they're doing with Google Ads, site search tracking, some query parameters that they're doing. This piece is really, really important, this. And I know most people just overlook it because they have no idea what it's asking them, but this is excluding URL query parameters. So the example here is, if, and I already spoke about this, Facebook will append query parameters to your URL. MailChimp will append query parameters. HubSpot, all of these different platforms will append something to the URL that they're sending data to. So Facebook, you do a post on Facebook, you'll drive traffic to your site, it will append something. You want to get rid of that. You want to strip that out because it's fine for Facebook to use, but you don't need to see that in your data. Because you're using UTMs, and I'm sure you all are, you already have a well-defined naming convention for your source, medium, campaign, and content. So you don't need FB CLID equals 110564. You don't need that. All it's doing is creating duplication of sort of the pages that you're seeing in your GA account. So you want to methodically go through this and strip it out. Let's see if they're doing the same thing in raw. So maybe I can show you an example. Guys, oof. Okay, so again, they should not be removed. I don't know who did this, but bad demo for Google. You should not be excluding anything in your raw view. Let me see if I can jump to Calamuna and we actually have this. Yeah. Actually, I'll skip that because we only have half an hour left. So you want to create 3 views. You create your views by, there's a little create view button, and then you specify a filter to say include or exclude something. So you may want to include Cambridge.com. You want to exclude test.cambridge.com. Again, I'm simplifying it. There's a specific way to do that, but that is what a filter is. You're going to use filters to do that. You're also going to use filters to clean and standardize your data. Almost every implementation that we do at Calamuna, let me jump to us here and filters. Oh, let me see. Oh, I know where it is. ATX. Okay, so there's some filters here. Different client, doesn't matter. So we're only including the production domain, right? So no testing, no whatever. We are having an advanced filter where we are prepending the host name. So all that means is instead of just seeing / as your #1 page, you're going to see cambridge.com /. So you see that host name at the beginning. And that is really useful because if you only have one view, the all master data, you could be collecting data from localhost, from staging, God knows from where. And if you have this, if you added this filter, you will at least see that. You haven't fixed anything yet, but at least you've identified that you have a problem. Then you have these lowercase filters, and these are very simple to set up. You're just going to lowercase, and then you're picking what are you going to lowercase. And you lowercase all of your events. You also may want to roll. Let's see if I have a better example. I don't. You may also want to lowercase all of your source, medium, campaign name, and content fields. The reason I say that is because if you do not have a UTM generator, and let me just show you what a that looks like. And there's a million of them. It doesn't matter which one you use. Just don't use the one that Google gives you. I don't know, not this, no. So there's all these websites that give you these free templates where basically you throw everything in. Zoom in. So you put in the naked URL and then you put in source, medium, da da da. It adds everything together, spits out the URL for you. This is how you want to do your UTMs. What I've seen clients do is they use this thing and they do one by one by one. And the problem is, one, it's time consuming, so we don't want to do that. And two, it's not consistent because you don't have anywhere where you're storing all the UTMs that you have. So, for Calamuna, we always create a UTM generator. And the work in the generator is not creating of it. We use a template. It's customizing it to every client because everybody will have different sources and mediums that may have to be bundled in different ways. So don't use this. Use a UTM generator. And where was I? And in here, the reason you want to lowercase everything that is a part of a UTM is because somebody, if not doing things consistently, can write source equals Facebook all lowercase. Someone can write source equals Facebook all uppercase. Someone can write face dash book. Someone can write capital F Facebook. You get the idea. There's all these permutations of Facebook that are possible, right? Just cases. Forget about the dash, that's a bad example, but there's cases that you can play around. You can do camel case, right? And when that person comes to your site, if you're not consistent about your naming conventions and someone used all caps, someone used all lowercase, that will be two different line items. Could be for the same campaign, but two different line items. So when you have these lowercase filters in your views, you're forcing all of this data to lowercase. So it doesn't matter that someone wrote capital Facebook, it's going to be forced lowercase. It doesn't matter that someone did, whatever other weird thing that they did. Everything will be lowercase. So I strongly recommend you lowercase everything relating to events, so category, action, and label, and everything relating to UTMs, source, medium, campaign name, and content. You don't really need to use term because term is all handled by Google Ads. So you don't really need to worry about that one. So that is filters. Goals, let's move on to that. So we're gonna create a new goal. They have these templates. I've never used one in my life. It's always custom. Hit continue. We're gonna say Badcamp. And then these are the types of goals that you're able to do. Again, you have destination, duration, which, duration and pages per screen set. I've never used these two. So these two, never use them. There's no value to them, okay? Destination is really for thank you pages. There's not much else you want to do. And an event, this is what you're going to be using most of the time. And then you're going to be saying, what is the event based on? Category, action, and label. Well, when we're doing our wonderful click action for, making new friends, we have CTA click, calamuna.com, and this. So I'm happy with just saying CTA click. I'm going to copy it, paste it, and I'm always going to say regular expression. I've been burned many times by cases. So equals to means it is exactly that. If you do regular expression, it means if the case is lowercase, that's fine, it'll still work. And then you don't just publish, you always want to verify your goal. Now, obviously, I haven't set anything up, and the change that I made, I did not publish. So this is telling me I have a 0% conversion rate. So fine, let's go to a goal that does work. So someone has downloaded something, right? So file download, details, very simple. Category, file downloads. It's generic. I'm not looking for a specific download. I'm just looking at all of them, file downloads. And then when I verify this goal, it's telling me that I have a almost 5% conversion rate in the past 7 days, right? Let's jump back to the demo store. Actually, no, let's not jump to the demo store. Let's go to channel settings. So let's see if I made changes to this. I have not. Just trying to find a good example here. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, good question, Martina. So the question is, why should I create an event in GA if I already did it in GTM? So you don't actually create events in GTM. You create events in Google Tag Manager, but they make their way into Google Analytics. So let me show you. Under the behavior reports, under events in the overview. So these are the events that have made their way from the site to our Calamuna view. So these are the events. And we'll look at just, let's say, outbound link clicked. So the category is outbound link clicked. The action is where were they on calamuna.com on our homepage. And then where are they going to? They're going to Facebook, they're going to LinkedIn, they're going to hit GitHub. So let me show you what that actually looks like, why that is triggering. So if I go here, so here you can see categories outbound link clicked, action is calamuna.com, and it's going to Facebook, right? So I made this event in Google Tag Manager. In Google Tag Manager, I created a rule to say, do I have GTM open? I don't. Let me show you. So here's my tag in Google Tag Manager. I have said that I want to fire outbound link clicked wherever I'm on with wherever I clicked on, and I'm going to do that based on if it's anything outside of Calamuna, right? So this is a very generic tag, basically saying if the click URL where I'm going to does not include calamuna.com or .ca, fire. So that's exactly what this thing is doing. So my tag is working in Google Tag Manager. It is pushing data into Google Analytics. In Google Analytics, I can see it here. Again, let me go back. So I can see the category being outbound link clicked. And I can see this is happening on the homepage. And on the homepage, there's a couple of ones, right? So there's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's GitHub. And now, based on this event, I can create a goal. Right, so you see, I'm hoping that it's somewhat clear, but these are all connected, right? That's why we have that little circle, right? These are all connected. So you build things in Google Tag Manager. There's nothing you build in Google Analytics. You just collect and analyze data in Google Analytics. So you build your data in Tag Manager. You then use that data in Analytics. So you already have it. So this data is already there. I haven't done anything to make it appear. The only extra step I've taken is to create a goal based on that. So for example, you could have a CTA button, which is donate now. So you will create a goal based on your event. So now anytime someone clicks on donate now, that will fire the event and that will create a +1 to your goals for donate now. So hopefully that was somewhat clear. It has been 3 hours. And you can see the same things like forms submitted. So these are the contact us forms. And you can see where they were submitted. So this is 3 simple UX button design things. So yeah. So that's the sort of the admin side of Google Analytics. So you need to create at least 3 views. The views you create by having filters, by saying include or exclude things. You create goals based on the events that are being pushed from Google Tag Manager, and goals are the way that you're going to evaluate your success. Because again, your bounce rate by itself does not matter. Your sessions, your pages, your duration, by themselves, they don't matter. But when you add goals like the % of people that click donate now, that is pretty good. You can also change your channel settings. So you can see in here, this is modified channel grouping, meaning that when you use UTMs, you will often, so there's nothing in Google Analytics in the default channel group to account for organic versus paid social. Nothing. It just all comes as social. And that's not helpful to you because you're using both. So you actually have to customize. You create what I call modified channel grouping. You can create however you want it. And you basically just say, paid social is any medium that contains social-paid. And because you're using a UTM generator in Google Sheets, all of your UTMs are beautiful and consistent, and you can confidently say that everything paid social will have this, social-paid. And it's the same case for, Calamuna. We participate in events before COVID. So medium will be events. Same thing, we have partners, medium is partner. So we have modified our channel grouping from the default. So everyone starts with default. You can then make a copy and modify it to suit your own needs, because every organization is going to have slightly different needs for how they want to track things. So that's channel grouping. Alerts we already talked about. That's really important. Segments. I think segments is important as well. Let's get into that. So before I actually get into segments, one thing I love and most people aren't aware of is the secondary dimension. Use it to give you just a little bit extra data. So now, for example, before I saw that, I'll show you again. This is the home page, this is the about page, the apply page. I actually don't know where they're happening. So when I add host name, now you see this one's actually on jobs. And if we look more, jobs, let's see, this is, still our job platform. We have some other stuff in here. So lots of different host names. If you want to create a segment where I only care about, who is coming to look for jobs on calamuna.com, I will go ahead and create a segment. And I will say, let's see, new segment based on a condition of, let's say they're somewhere in their journey page, it contains jobs like that. Or maybe we want to make it more generic, job. That's better. Still very low, but so this is how you create segments. You basically define if that thing happened in a session or the user one. This one is more sort of try to wrap your head around it, is based on a client ID that Google Analytics has placed on your machine. Have I seen you before? Okay, so session means in any particular session. A user could mean anytime you've ever come. I don't care if it's a particular session, it's all time based on your time range. So you can see how this number changes from one user having 6 sessions to one user in 1 session. Again, this is a bad example. Let me see if there's anything better. I don't know. People that read our about page. So that is 11%. So we go from session to user. That doesn't change much. Most of the time, you guys are going to use session. User is maybe like lifetime, how much money they've spent with us, e-commerce. There's use cases for everything. I'm just sort of starting to dumb down after 3 hours, so excuse me for that. But this is how you create a segment, and then you can say viewed about us. And one thing I want to point out is that this is not an iron wall. This is not just show me about. This is everyone that saw the about page somewhere in their session. So I'm going to save that. It doesn't mean that was the only page where they came there and they left there, whatever. Let's add all users as well, and you can compare the difference. So you can see that, so we have 2 segments, all users, which is everybody, and just the people that at some point in their journey saw about us. And now you can compare them, right? See sort of how you start slicing and dicing. A better example would have been how many people downloaded something, how many people paid for something, how many people played a video, how many people performed an action you want. So if you're trying to analyze engaged versus non-engaged, this is how you would do it. You would start creating segments and you would dig around. So again, Martina, to answer your question, you can't do this in Data Studio. You can only do this in Google Analytics. So for the nitty gritty, you're going to do it in Google Analytics. And you can see, so this is viewed about a segment, this page views, time, entrances, balance rate. So you can see, for example, people that viewed our About Us page have a much lower bounce rate, meaning they probably came to the home page, then they went to the About Us page. So by default, they didn't bounce because they saw more than one page. And you can also see that by 71 entrances. So that means that only 71 visits started on About Us out of 270. And this is how you use segments. Again, this is, there's tons of documentation out there for sort of how to use segments far more eloquently than what I'm showing you guys now. But segments are useful to start getting, looking at the nitty gritty and start comparing. Are people coming from this source versus that source? How do they look like? It's useful for acquisition as well. So if you are in here in your channels report, and you're going to be looking at organic search, how does it perform for people that are logged in versus not logged in? People that have donated in the past versus people that have not. So this is how you create segments, right? So you're going to look at your content, you're going to look at your devices, you're going to look at your channels, and you're going to compare different segments of the population that have been to your site. I'm just thinking if there's more I want to cover. I mean, there's so much more that can be covered of the GA. It's a massive tool. I can do 3 hours on it by itself as well. But I also don't want to overload you guys. Maybe we do part 2 at some point. I do want to leave 15 minutes for you guys. So if you want to, let me see if I can unmute everybody. I'm going to stop my video for a second. Let me see. Is there an unmute? So yeah, if you guys want to unmute yourselves and ask questions, go ahead. I think we're done. We have 15 minutes left, so if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer that. Can't unmute. Okay. Ask all to unmute. How about that?
Testing.
I hear you.
So I got a pop-up saying that we could unmute.
Yeah, it's working well.
Hey, Vadim, you had on one of your views, there was an exclude webbot traffic filter. What does that look like? That wasn't the checkbox. That was one of your views.
I wouldn't bother, honestly, Henry.
Okay.
There's so many variations of bots. A lot of them are headless now. Most of the filters, like you'll do some Googling and you'll try to sort of apply them to your account. And most of them are going to be so generic, they're not actually going to work. And it's going to be really hard to even figure out these are bots. So my suggestion is you're going to have to do a little bit of digging in your account in terms of how long are people spending on certain pages? Where are they coming from? So like internet service provider, if it's still available, I think that GA removed it, but there is a way to bring it back. So internet service provider is a really helpful one because if you see traffic coming from Amazon Web Services, you know they're not real people. That means someone is hosting an application on Amazon and they're crawling your site. So a lot of tools do that, right?
Okay.
If you see traffic coming from a particular location, so I mentioned Brazil in my example. If you have traffic coming from I've seen it down to the specific city, right? So a specific city, for whatever reason, is huge versus everything else. It's a sign of bots. It's not 100%, but it's something to get you started. Because if you start looking at what other people have done and the filters they've applied, I've gone through the rabbit hole. Don't bother. There's nothing useful there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Henry.
Sure.
Question from Martina in terms of where did I learn this? There's so many different places, to be honest. Google Analytics has their own academy. I think it's literally called Google Analytics Academy, where there's training videos and courses. There is Course Academy, there's Udemy. But to be honest, the only real way to learn this is just to do it. You can watch all the videos you want. You're not going to be able to, you need practical application. You need to start doing it. A good way is that demo store that I linked to, so you can at least get familiar with the interface, because I realize you may not have access to an analytics account that has a lot of traffic. So you may not be able to use all the things that you want. So yeah, it's just, I mean, years of experience. I've been doing this for 12 years. So a little bit of that, but also just practice. You know, when I started, GTM didn't exist. Google Data Studio didn't exist. So not much I can do there. Let's see. So a question from Chad in terms of using other, I'll call it other platforms, not just AW Stats, but other platforms. There's Momodo, there is other packages. So this is the art and science thing I was talking about. There is no one number that is right. So if you're getting numbers from AW Stats, which is different from GA, fine. GA is not the truth. It's only truth if you make it. Don't forget, in the example of me having, at the very beginning, I had my ad blocking turned on. You would never see me in Google Analytics. I'm not sure how AW Stats works, but if I don't have my cookies enabled, so if you have ad blocking as you're browsing the web, there's nothing that GA is able to capture, right? So all tools are susceptible to their own problems. So there's no perfect tool. And when it comes to Europe, it becomes even worse because they have GDPR, and by default, everything is turned off. So nothing works. So, you know, we've seen clients where they've had traffic and it just plummets, not because anything is wrong, because people are choosing not to accept cookies. Like, thankfully, in the States and Canada, we don't have the same issue. But the point is, there's no perfect tool. There will always be a mismatch. I often get asked the difference between Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics, and they're different. And the reality is different tools measure even something as simple as page views differently, right? So you can read documentation how Adobe does it versus how Google does it, and it sounds the same, but it's not. So there will always be a mismatch. And as long as you stick to one, you're fine. As long as you know that, you know, it's not 100% accurate, because it never will be. It's fine. Also, one thing that you should know is here, this is green. This report is based on 100% of sessions. Oh, am I screen sharing? Yes, I'm still screen sharing. Okay, good. Let me try to add some random things, random segments. Of course, because I'm trying to show it to you, it doesn't work. But if always check this little shield icon. Sometimes it turns yellow, and that will mean that your data is getting sampled, meaning that Google's taking whatever percentage it's telling you, so 50%, 60%, and extrapolating the rest. So this happens when you have not a default, so you're not looking at a default report like we are now, but you've created something custom, you've applied segments to it, it will start sampling your data, which will make your reporting hard, because if you look at your data, let's say you're looking at your January data in September, and you look at it in October, and then in November, you may get 3 different numbers. So it further complicates things. So I think you guys do have the power to unmute yourselves. If not, just write it in chat. I think we're done for the day. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. There's a lot of you. 23 participants. I'm really happy with that turnout. It's definitely different than last year, where we did this face-to-face and I could walk around and poke and show people things. But I appreciate you guys sticking around for 3.5 almost hours. If there's anything, if any questions you guys have, funnel them through the Calamuna website. So just go to calamuna.com, fill out the contact form, and then they will route that directly to me. We'd be more than happy to, in terms of kind of services that we do audits, we do implementations, we would do dashboards, like everything I just covered, we obviously do. I will be the one doing those things as well. So if you liked me, feel free to send us a note saying that. And if you guys want to work with us, we'd love the opportunity to work with you as well. So if there's no further questions, I don't see anything in the chat.
Hey, Fatima, I was going to ask something if no one else has anything.
Sure.
Do you have just a favorite or go-to report in Google Analytics that you find use more
No, I don't. So I usually, so there's kind of like my way into
than
GA
others?
starts with admin. I know it's not like intuitive, but I actually always start here and I look at filters because I always want to make sure what is the data I'm looking at first, right? Like, is it clean? Then I go into acquisition, all traffic channels, and forget about all these segments, but I'm trying to figure out where are people coming from. Then I go into behavior and I look at site content.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the pages that people are looking at. And then I go into events if they have been set up. So those are like the three things. There's not like one, there's three. So I look at where are people coming from, what are they looking at, what are they clicking on via events.
Okay. Thanks. Your report looks a little different. It has like the breakdown for number one about. There's, when you scroll down where it says slash number one. Oh, that's why.
It's just segments.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll see this.
Yeah, okay. Cool, thanks.
Sure. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.